The retreat of the last Ice Age glaciers around 10,000 years ago transformed the landscape of Mesoamerica, creating the environmental conditions that would foster one of humanity's most significant agricultural revolutions. As megafauna disappeared and climate patterns stabilized, small bands of Paleo-Indian hunter-gatherers found themselves in a world where traditional hunting strategies required fundamental adaptation. The massive mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats that had sustained their ancestors vanished, replaced by smaller game and an increasingly diverse array of plant resources. Archaeological evidence from sites like Gila Nakit's cave in Oaxaca reveals the gradual shift in subsistence strategies beginning around 8000 BC. Stone tool assemblages from this period show a marked decrease in large projectile points designed for hunting megafauna, replaced instead by smaller, more diverse implements suited for processing plant materials and hunting smaller animals. Groundstone tools, particularly manos and metates used for grinding seeds and nuts, appear with increasing frequency in archaeological deposits, signalling the growing importance of plant foods in the diet. The transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture did not occur overnight, but unfolded across millennia through a complex process of experimentation and gradual domestication. Wild teosinte, the ancestor of modern maize, grew naturally throughout much of Mesoamerica, producing tiny seeds barely resembling the corn kernels we know today. Archaeological botanist Richard McNeish's excavations in the Tehuacan Valley during the 1960s provided crucial evidence for this transformation, revealing a sequence of increasingly domesticated maize specimens dating from approximately 7000 BC onward. The earliest domesticated maize cobs measured only 25 millimeters in length, containing perhaps 8 to 12 kernels each. These primitive ears bore little resemblance to their wild teosinte ancestors, which produced seeds that shattered easily upon maturity, an adaptive mechanism for natural seed dispersal. Human selection gradually favoured plants with seeds that remained attached to the cob, a trait that made harvesting more efficient but rendered the plants entirely dependent on human intervention for reproduction. Beans underwent a parallel domestication process, with wild tepary beans and runner beans providing the genetic foundation for what would become a staple crop. Archaeological evidence suggests that beans were being cultivated in Mesoamerica by at least 6000 BC, though the process likely began earlier. The symbiotic relationship between beans and maize, beans fixing nitrogen in the soil while maize provided structural support for climbing bean vines, was not immediately apparent to early agriculturalists but developed through centuries of experimentation. Squash domestication preceded both maize and beans, with evidence from Gila Nakit's cave indicating cultivation as early as 8000 BC. Wild squash varieties provided not only edible flesh and nutritious seeds, but also valuable containers fashioned from dried gourds. The selection process focused initially on increasing seed size and flesh quantity, later expanding to include improvements in storage capabilities and resistance to pests. The Tehuacan Valley emerged as a crucial laboratory for agricultural development due to its unique environmental characteristics. Located in the rain shadow of the Sierra Madre Oriental, the valley experiences a semi-arid climate with distinct wet and dry seasons. This environment concentrated both wild plant resources and human populations around reliable water sources, creating conditions conducive to intensive plant management and eventual domestication. Excavations at Coxcatlan Cave revealed a detailed sequence of occupation spanning from 10000 BC to 500 AD, providing unparalleled insight into the gradual transition from foraging to farming. The cave's dry conditions preserved organic materials that would have decomposed in more humid environments, including basketry, cordage, textiles, and most importantly plant remains. Analysis of coprolites, preserved human feces, from various levels of the cave revealed changing dietary patterns, with wild plant foods gradually supplemented and eventually replaced by domesticated varieties. The shift towards sedentary village life did not occur uniformly across Mesoamerica, but varied considerably based on local environmental conditions and resource availability. In the highland valleys of central Mexico, permanent settlements appeared by approximately 3,500 BC, coinciding with the development of more productive maize varieties. These early villages typically consisted of small clusters of pit houses or simple above-ground structures housing extended family groups of 25, 50 individuals. Oaxaca's central valleys witnessed a similar trajectory but with distinct regional characteristics. The Etla, Tlacolula and Zachila valleys provided diverse ecological niches within relatively short distances, allowing early farmers to exploit multiple environmental zones while maintaining centralized settlements. Sites like San Jose Mogote, occupied by 1500 BC, demonstrate sophisticated village organization with evidence of craft specialization, long-distance trade, and emerging social hierarchies. The development of ceramic technology marked another crucial milestone in Mesoamerican cultural evolution. The earliest pottery in Mesoamerica appears around 3,500 BC in coastal regions, with distinctive traditions emerging in both Pacific and Gulf Coast areas. Early ceramic vessels served primarily utilitarian functions, providing waterproof containers for cooking, storage, and transport. The ability to boil foods in ceramic vessels significantly expanded dietary options, making previously inedible or difficult to digest plant materials nutritionally accessible. Pottery production required specialized knowledge of clay sources, tempering materials, firing techniques, and vessel construction. Archaeological evidence suggests that ceramic technology spread rapidly across Mesoamerica through networks of cultural exchange and population movement. Regional variations in pottery styles, decoration techniques, and vessel forms emerged quickly, reflecting local preferences and cultural identities. The Puron complex in the Tuacan Valley, dating to approximately 2300 BC, represents one of the earliest ceramic traditions in highland Mesoamerica. These vessels display simple, functional forms with minimal decoration, focusing on practical considerations rather than aesthetic elaboration. Temper materials included crushed rock, sand, and occasionally organic materials like ground shell, reflecting local resource availability and technological preferences. Environmental adaptation played a crucial role in shaping early Mesoamerican cultural development. The region's extraordinary ecological diversity, ranging from tropical rainforests to high-altitude plateaus, from coastal plains to desert basins, required distinct adaptive strategies and technological solutions. Groups inhabiting the Maya lowlands developed sophisticated water management systems to deal with seasonal drought, constructing reservoirs, canals, and raised fields to maximize agricultural productivity. Highland populations faced different challenges, including temperature fluctuations, frost risk, and limited growing seasons. Terracing systems appeared early in highland agricultural development, preventing soil erosion while creating level planting surfaces on steep slopes. These agricultural modifications represented significant investments of labor and planning, indicating increasingly complex social organization and long-term commitment to particular territories. Coastal populations exploited rich marine resources while developing agricultural systems adapted to sandy soils and salt spray. Shell middens from Pacific coast sites reveal intensive exploitation of mollusks, crustaceans, and fish, supplemented by cultivated plants and wild terrestrial resources. The integration of marine and terrestrial subsistence strategies created distinctive coastal cultures that would influence later Mesoamerican civilizations. Regional cultural variations emerged partly from environmental adaptations, but also reflected different historical trajectories and cultural contacts. The Archaic period witnessed the establishment of long-distance exchange networks, that connected diverse ecological zones and cultural groups. Obsidian from highland volcanic sources appears in lowland archaeological sites, while marine shells travelled hundreds of kilometres inland, indicating sophisticated trade relationships and cultural interaction. Religious and ceremonial activities developed alongside agricultural intensification and village formation. Archaeological evidence from sites like Gyeoshi in Oaxaca reveals deliberate arrangement of stones in dance floors or ceremonial plazas by 5000 BC, suggesting communal ritual activities predating permanent village establishment. These early ceremonial features indicate that religious practices evolved in tandem with economic and social changes rather than following them. Burial practices during the Archaic period show increasing differentiation in treatment of the dead, possibly reflecting emerging social hierarchies or specialized religious roles. Some individuals received elaborate burial treatment with grave goods including groundstone tools, ornaments and food offerings, while others were interred with minimal accompaniment. This variation suggests developing concepts of social status and individual identity within increasingly complex communities. The domestication process extended beyond food crops to include other economically important plants. Cotton cultivation began during the Archaic period, providing raw material for textile production. Archaeological remains of cotton textiles from dry cave sites demonstrate sophisticated weaving techniques and decorative patterns, indicating that cloth production had become an important craft specialization. Agave and other fibre plants were also brought under cultivation, providing materials for cordage, basketry and coarse textiles. Tool technology evolved significantly during the Archaic period, reflecting changing subsistence strategies and technological innovation. Groundstone implements became increasingly common and sophisticated, with specialized tools for processing different plant foods, mortars and pestles for crushing seeds and nuts, grinding stones for processing maize, and polished axes for woodworking represent major technological advances that facilitated agricultural intensification and village life. Chipstone technology also evolved, with projectile points becoming smaller and more standardized, reflecting the shift from hunting large game to smaller animals and increased importance of plant foods. Specialized tools for plant processing, including scrapers, knives and perforators, appear in greater variety and frequency, demonstrating technological adaptation to changing subsistence needs. The Archaic period established fundamental patterns that would characterize Mesoamerican civilization for millennia. Agricultural systems based on maize, beans and squash provided the economic foundation for population growth and social complexity. Village life created contexts for craft specialization, religious elaboration, and political development. Regional cultural variations established during this period would influence the distinctive characteristics of later civilizations, from the Maya to the Aztec. The agricultural foundations established during the Archaic period created conditions that would support Mesoamerica's first complex civilization. Along the humid Gulf Coast lowlands of what is now southern Veracruz and western Tabasco, a remarkable cultural transformation began around 1500 BC that would profoundly influence every subsequent Mesoamerican society. The Olmec civilization emerged, not as a sudden development, but as the culmination of centuries of population growth, technological innovation, and social complexity that had been building throughout the late Archaic period. The term Olmec derives from the Nahuatl word meaning rubber people, a name applied by the Aztecs to the inhabitants of this region over 2 millennia later. Modern scholars adopted this designation for the archaeological culture, though we remain uncertain what these ancient people called themselves. What is certain is that they developed the first truly urban centres in Mesoamerica, established monumental architectural traditions, and created artistic and symbolic systems that would resonate throughout the region for over 3,000 years. The Gulf Coast lowlands provided an ideal environment for the emergence of complex society. Annual flooding of the Coatzacoalcos, Tonala, and Grijalva river systems deposited fertile alluvium across broad floodplains, creating exceptionally productive agricultural land. The region's tropical climate supported year-round cultivation, while abundant rainfall eliminated the water management challenges faced by highland populations. Rich estuarine environments provided diverse protein sources including fish, shellfish, waterfowl, and aquatic reptiles, supplementing agricultural production and supporting dense populations. San Lorenzo emerged as the earliest major Olmec centre around 1500 BC, constructed on a plateau rising approximately 150 feet above the surrounding floodplain. The site's commanding position provided both defensive advantages and symbolic significance, establishing a pattern of elevated ceremonial centres that would characterise Mesoamerican urban planning for millennia. Archaeological investigations led by Michael Coe during the 1960s reveal that San Lorenzo was not simply built upon a natural hill, but represented one of history's most ambitious landscape modification projects. The Olmec literally reshaped the terrain, moving an estimated 2.3 million cubic feet of earth to create artificial ridges, platforms, and plazas. This massive undertaking required coordinated labour from thousands of workers over many decades, indicating sophisticated social organisation and centralised authority unprecedented in Mesoamerican prehistory. The plateau's surface was divided into distinct functional areas, with residential zones for different social classes, craft production areas, and ceremonial precincts arranged according to a predetermined plan. The most striking features of San Lorenzo were the colossal basalt heads that dominated the site's ceremonial areas. 10 of these monumental sculptures have been discovered at San Lorenzo, each weighing between 10 and 50 tons and standing up to 3.4 meters in height. Carved from basalt quarried in the Tuxtla Mountains over 60 kilometers away, these heads represent individual rulers wearing distinctive helmets or headdresses. The transportation of these massive stones across rivers and swampland represents a logistical achievement requiring sophisticated engineering knowledge and enormous labour investment. Each colossal head displays unique facial features and regalia, suggesting they functioned as portraits of specific rulers rather than generic representations of authority. Monument 1 at San Lorenzo shows a figure with a broad face, thick lips, and a helmet decorated with what appears to be a jaguar pelt. Monument 17 displays more angular features with a headdress featuring rope-like elements and possible ear ornaments. The individualized nature of these sculptures indicates that Olmec society had developed concepts of divine kingship and personal rulership that would become central to later Mesoamerican political systems. The basalt used for these sculptures and other monuments came from Cerro Sintepec in the Tuxtla Mountains, requiring transport across difficult terrain. Recent experimental archaeology has demonstrated that moving a 20-ton basalt block would have required approximately 1,500 people working in coordinated teams, using wooden rollers, ropes, and possibly rafts for river crossings. The Olmec developed specialized quarrying techniques, using controlled heating and cooling to fracture basalt along desired lines, then employing stone and wooden tools to shape the rough blocks before transport. Beyond the colossal heads, San Lorenzo featured numerous other monumental sculptures including altars, stelae and zoomorphic figures. Altar 4 depicts a ruler emerging from a cave-like niche, holding a rope that connects to smaller figures carved on the monument's sides. This imagery relates to fundamental Olmec religious concepts, associating caves with the underworld and rulership with supernatural power. The altar's design establishes iconographic traditions that would persist throughout Mesoamerican history, appearing in Maya, Zapotec, and Central Mexican art centuries later. The site's hydraulic engineering achievements were equally impressive. The Olmec constructed an elaborate drainage system using carved basalt troughs and underground conduits to channel water throughout the ceremonial centre. These stone-lined drains, some measuring over 170 metres in length, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydraulic principles and urban planning. Water management was not merely practical but carried profound religious significance, as the Olmec associated flowing water with supernatural forces and ritual purification. Around 1150 BC, San Lorenzo experienced violent destruction. Many monuments were deliberately mutilated and buried, colossal heads were defaced, and much of the ceremonial architecture was abandoned. Archaeological evidence suggests this destruction resulted from internal conflict rather than external invasion, possibly representing dynastic warfare or social revolution. The systematic nature of monument destruction indicates that the perpetrators understood the symbolic importance of these sculptures and sought to eliminate their political and religious power. As San Lorenzo declined, La Venta emerged as the dominant Olmec centre around 1000 BC. Located on an island in the Tonala River, La Venta represented a new phase of Olmec civilization, with even more sophisticated architectural planning and monumental construction. The site was organised along a precise north-south axis, with ceremonial structures arranged in a complex that extended over 200 hectares. This axial planning would become a fundamental principle of Mesoamerican urban design, appearing at Teotihuacan, Monte Alban, and numerous other sites. La Venta's most prominent feature was the Great Pyramid, a fluted cone rising 34 metres above the surrounding landscape. Constructed entirely of clay and earth, this monument required approximately 800,000 cubic metres of fill material, representing an even more massive labour investment than San Lorenzo's earthworks. The pyramid's unique fluted design may have been inspired by nearby volcanic cones, connecting the monument to geological features that held religious significance in Olmec cosmology. The ceremonial complex at La Venta included numerous plazas, platforms, and buried offerings that reveal sophisticated ritual practices. Complex A, the site's main ceremonial precinct, contained 3 massive offerings of serpentine blocks, arranged in mosaic patterns representing stylized jaguar masks. These mosaics, measuring up to 4.5 by 6 metres, were carefully constructed then immediately buried, suggesting they served ritual rather than decorative purposes. The serpentine came from sources in Guerrero, over 350 kilometres away, demonstrating La Venta's extensive trade connections and ability to acquire exotic materials. La Venta's sculptural program continued traditions established at San Lorenzo while introducing new iconographic elements. 4 colossal heads adorned the site, each displaying the distinctive Olmec style but with variations in facial features and regalia. Monument 1 shows a ruler wearing a headdress with hanging elements, while Monument 2 features a more austere design with geometric patterns. These variations suggest either chronological development in artistic style or representation of different ruling lineages. The site also featured numerous stelae altars with increasingly complex iconographic programs. Stela 3 depicts a figure wearing an elaborate headdress and holding ceremonial objects, surrounded by floating motifs that may represent astronomical symbols or supernatural entities. Altar 5 shows multiple figures engaged in ritual activities, with one central character holding what appears to be an infant or supernatural being. These monuments demonstrate the development of narrative sculptural traditions that would reach full expression in later Maya and Zapotec art. La Venta's most remarkable discovery was the burial of a ruler in Tomb A, constructed from basalt columns arranged to form a stone sarcophagus. The individual was interred with jade ornaments, obsidian blades, and ceramic vessels, indicating high status and elaborate mortuary practices. Jade held particular significance in Olmec culture, associated with water, fertility, and supernatural power. The mineral's brilliant green colour connected it to growing vegetation and the life-giving properties of rain, making it more valuable than gold in Mesoamerican societies. Tres Zapotes emerged as the third major Olmec center of around 1000 BC and continued to flourish long after La Venta's decline around 400 BC. Located in the Tuxtla Mountains foothills, Tres Zapotes occupied a different environmental niche from the earlier centers, suggesting adaptation to changing conditions or expansion into new territories. The site's longevity makes it crucial for understanding the transition from Olmec civilization to later cultural developments in the region. Tres Zapotes is best known for Stela C, which bears the earliest confirmed long count date in Mesoamerica, corresponding to 32 BC in the Gregorian calendar. This monument demonstrates that Olmec innovations in calendrical systems continue to develop long after the civilization's supposed decline, influencing the sophisticated temporal calculations that would characterize later Maya and Central Mexican cultures. The stela's iconography combines traditional Olmec motifs with elements that anticipate later artistic styles, illustrating cultural continuity across supposed period boundaries. The site's colossal heads show stylistic evolution from earlier examples, with more naturalistic facial features and elaborate headdresses. Monument A displays particularly refined carving techniques, with subtle modelling of facial features and detailed rendering of textile patterns on the ruler's headdress. These artistic developments suggest that Olmec sculptural traditions continue to evolve throughout the civilization's existence rather than remaining static. Olmec symbolic systems established fundamental concepts that would persist throughout Mesoamerican history. The jaguar held central importance in Olmec iconography, appearing in various forms from naturalistic representations to highly stylized word jaguar figures, combining human and feline characteristics. These beings often display cleft heads, downturned mouths, and fanged teeth, representing supernatural entities associated with rain, fertility, and rulership. Archaeological evidence suggests that Olmec rulers claimed descent from or transformation into jaguar spirits, establishing precedents for later Mesoamerican concepts of divine kingship. The feathered serpent, another crucial Mesoamerican deity, first appears in Olmec art as a supernatural being combining avian and reptilian characteristics. Monument 19 at La Venta depicts a figure wearing a headdress featuring serpent and bird elements, while various smaller sculptures show fully developed feathered serpent imagery. This deity would later become known as Kukulkan to the Maya and Quetzalcoatl to Central Mexican peoples, maintaining consistent associations with wind, rain, and divine authority across cultures and centuries. Olmec contributions to Mesoamerican calendrical systems were equally fundamental. While the full long count system may not have achieved final form until later periods, Olmec monuments display clear evidence of systematic timekeeping and astronomical observation. The precise axial orientation of La Venta and other sites demonstrates sophisticated understanding of solar and stellar movements, while iconographic elements on various monuments appear to reference specific celestial events or calendrical periods. The bar and dot numerical notation system, fundamental to later Mesoamerican mathematics, appears in early form on Olmec monuments. This vigesimal system would become standard throughout the region, enabling the complex calculations necessary for astronomical prediction and calendrical correlation. Olmec innovations in mathematical notation and temporal calculation provided essential foundations for the intellectual achievements of later civilizations. Trade networks established during the Olmec period connected diverse regions across Mesoamerica, facilitating the spread of artistic styles, religious concepts, and technological innovations. Obsidian from Central Mexican sources appears at Olmec sites, while Olmec-style ceramics and sculptures have been found from Guerrero to El Salvador. These exchange systems were not merely economic, but served to transmit cultural information and established political alliances across vast distances. The Olmec established trading posts and colonies throughout their sphere of influence, spreading their cultural innovations far beyond the Gulf Coast heartland. Chalcatzingo in Morelos displays clear Olmec influence in its relief sculptures, which depict rulers in Olmec style surrounded by iconographic elements derived from Gulf Coast traditions. Teopantecuanitlan in Guerrero features architectural elements and sculptural programs that directly copy Olmec prototypes, suggesting either colonial occupation or intensive cultural contact. The cultural innovations pioneered by the Olmec did not exist in isolation, but spread throughout Mesoamerica during a period of unprecedented urban development and regional specialization. Between 1000 BC and 250 AD, distinct civilizations emerged across the diverse landscapes of ancient Mexico and Central America, each adapting Olmec precedents to local conditions while developing unique architectural, artistic, and political traditions. This formative period witnessed the establishment of Mesoamerica's first true cities, the codification of complex writing systems, and the crystallization of religious practices that would endure for over 2 millennia. In the highland valleys of Oaxaca, the Zapotec civilization emerged as a sophisticated urban society centered on the mountaintop city of Monte Alban. Founded around 500 BC on a flattened hilltop 400 meters above the valley floor, Monte Alban represented a radical departure from earlier settlement patterns. Unlike previous communities that clustered near water sources and fertile bottomland, the Zapotecs chose an elevated position that commanded panoramic views of the Etla, Tlacolula, and Zachila valleys while providing natural defensive advantages. The decision to establish Monte Alban required massive landscape modification that dwarfed even Olmec earth-moving projects. Zapotec engineers leveled approximately 40 hectares of mountaintop terrain, removing an estimated 3.5 million cubic meters of bedrock and soil to create the Great Plaza and surrounding architectural complexes. This monumental undertaking involved coordinating thousands of workers using stone tools, wooden levers, and human labour to reshape the mountain according to a predetermined urban plan that prioritised ceremonial and administrative functions over residential convenience. The Great Plaza stretched 300 metres north to south and 200 metres east to west, creating one of Mesoamerica's largest public spaces. Surrounded by pyramidal platforms, palaces, and temple complexes, the plaza served as the ceremonial heart of Zapotec civilization and a stage for rituals that reinforced royal authority and cosmic order. The plaza's precise rectangular form and cardinal orientation demonstrated sophisticated surveying techniques and astronomical knowledge, establishing architectural principles that would influence Mesoamerican urban planning for centuries. Building J, located at the plaza's southern end, represents one of Mesoamerica's most unusual architectural achievements. Constructed in an arrow-like shape pointing southwest toward the Star Capella, this structure combined astronomical observation with political propaganda in its extensive hieroglyphic inscriptions. The building's walls display over 40 carved slabs depicting conquered towns, each represented by a placeglyph surmounted by an inverted human head symbolizing military defeat. These conquest slabs provide the earliest extensive historical records in Mesoamerica, documenting Zapotec military campaigns and territorial expansion during Monte Alban's early phases. The Zapotec writing system, first appearing around 600 BC, developed independently from Olmec symbolic traditions, while incorporating some shared Mesoamerican iconographic elements. Unlike later Maya hieroglyphic writing, which combined logographic and syllabic elements in complex grammatical structures, early Zapotec script appears to have functioned primarily as a system for recording names, dates, and historical events. The glyphs display a distinctive angular style with geometric elements that reflect the mountainous landscape of Oaxaca and the architectural preferences of Zapotec builders. Zapotec calendrical inscriptions demonstrate sophisticated mathematical and astronomical knowledge, rivaling contemporary developments in other Mesoamerican regions. Monument J displays dates calculated according to a 260-day ritual calendar, combined with a 365-day solar year, creating the 52-year calendar round that became standard throughout ancient Mexico. The precision of these calculations required detailed observation of celestial movements and complex mathematical computations performed using the vigesimal numerical system inherited from Olmec innovations. Monte Alban's residential areas extended across multiple terraces carved into the mountainside, housing an estimated 25,000 inhabitants at the city's peak around 200 AD. Archaeological investigations have revealed distinct neighbourhoods organised according to social status and occupational specialisation. Elite residences near the ceremonial centre featured stone masonry construction, interior courtyards, and elaborate tombs filled with jade ornaments, ceramic vessels, and gold jewellery. Commoner households occupied terraced plots further from the plaza, living in adobe structures with thatched roofs and maintaining small garden plots for subsistence crops. The city's water management system represented another remarkable engineering achievement. Since Monte Alban's elevated position placed it far from natural water sources, Zapotec engineers constructed an elaborate network of cisterns, channels, and reservoirs to collect and distribute rainwater throughout the urban area. Stone-lined canals directed runoff from building roofs and plaza surfaces into underground storage chambers carved directly into the bedrock. During the dry season, this stored water sustained the entire population through carefully regulated distribution systems controlled by civic authorities. Zapotec artistic traditions developed distinctive regional characteristics while maintaining connections to broader Mesoamerican symbolic systems. Ceramic urns depicting seated figures with elaborate headdresses and ceremonial regalia represent some of ancient America's finest sculptural achievements. These funerary vessels, placed in tombs to accompany deceased rulers and nobles, display intricate iconographic programs combining human figures with supernatural beings, astronomical symbols, and hieroglyphic inscriptions. The urn's technical sophistication required specialized knowledge of clay preparation, firing techniques, and decorative applications that indicate highly developed craft traditions. Tomb 7 at Monte Alban, discovered by Alfonso Caso in 1932, contained the richest burial assemblage ever found in Mesoamerica, with over 500 objects including gold jewellery, carved jade, crystal vessels, and decorated bones. The tomb's occupant, a high-ranking noble or ruler, was interred with materials obtained through long-distance trade networks extending from central Mexico to Central America. Mixtec artisans, who reoccupied Monte Alban during the post-classic period, created many of the tomb's finest objects, demonstrating cultural continuity and artistic evolution across supposed period boundaries. While Monte Alban dominated the Oaxacan highlands, Maya civilization was emerging in the tropical lowlands of Guatemala, Belize, and southeastern Mexico. Unlike the centralized urban development characteristic of Monte Alban, early Maya settlements displayed a more dispersed pattern reflecting adaptation to rainforest environments and seasonal water availability. Nevertheless, by 600 BC, Maya communities were constructing monumental architecture that rivaled contemporary developments in other Mesoamerican regions. El Mirador, located in the remote Peyton rainforest of northern Guatemala, emerged as one of the earliest Maya urban centers and possibly the largest city in the pre-Columbian Americas. The site's massive pyramidal complexes, connected by raised causeways extending for dozens of kilometers through dense jungle, demonstrate organizational capabilities and labor mobilization that challenge traditional assumptions about early Maya political development. La Danta Pyramid, El Mirador's largest structure, rises 72 meters above the forest floor and contains approximately 2.8 million cubic meters of stone and fill, making it one of the world's most voluminous ancient buildings. The construction of La Danta required quarrying and transporting millions of limestone blocks through dense rainforest terrain, without wheeled vehicles or draft animals. Maya engineers developed sophisticated techniques for moving heavy stone, using wooden rollers, rope systems, and coordinated human labour. The pyramid's complex internal structure includes multiple construction phases spanning several centuries, indicating continuous occupation and periodic renovation that required sustained political authority and economic resources. El Mirador's urban layout demonstrates sophisticated planning principles adapted to tropical forest conditions. The city's core area covers approximately 650 hectares, with monumental architecture clustered around large plazas connected by elevated causeways called Sakbeob. These stone-paved roadways, raised 1-2 meters above the surrounding terrain, provided dry passage during the rainy season while serving ceremonial and symbolic functions related to Maya concepts of cosmic order and royal procession. Nakbe, located 13 kilometers southeast of El Mirador, represents another early Maya urban centre with monumental construction beginning around 1000 BC. The site's earliest pyramids display architectural features that would become standard in later Maya construction, including steep-sided platforms, summit temples, and elaborate stairway systems decorated with carved masks and geometric patterns. Structure 1 at Nakbe rises 45 meters above the plaza level and features massive stone masks flanking its central stairway, representing some of the earliest examples of Maya architectural sculpture. These early Maya centers developed in response to population growth and agricultural intensification, made possible by sophisticated water management systems. The Petén region experiences pronounced seasonal rainfall patterns, with a 5-month dry season that required careful water conservation for year-round occupation. Maya engineers constructed elaborate networks of reservoirs, canals, and retention ponds that collected rainwater runoff and stored it in artificial depressions lined with clay and stone. The largest reservoir at El Mirador covers over 30 hectares and could store millions of litres of water, sufficient to sustain the city's population through extended drought periods. Maya agricultural systems combined raised field cultivation with forest management techniques that maximize productivity while maintaining ecological sustainability. In seasonally flooded areas, Maya farmers constructed raised planting surfaces surrounded by drainage canals that provided rich organic soil and reliable moisture for crops. These raised fields, known as chinampas in central Mexico, supported intensive cultivation of maize, beans, squash, and other crops while creating habitat for fish, waterfowl, and other protein sources. Forest management involved selective cutting and controlled burning that created mosaic landscapes of agricultural plots, managed woodlands, and preserved forest areas. Maya farmers planted fruit trees, managed palm groves for construction materials and food products, and maintained medicinal plant gardens that provided raw materials for ritual and therapeutic purposes. This integrated approach to landscape management supported dense populations while preserving the ecological diversity essential for long-term sustainability. Maya writing systems began developing during this early period, though the earliest known inscriptions date to around 250 BC. Unlike Zapotec script, which appears to have functioned primarily for historical and calendrical recording, Maya hieroglyphic writing evolved into a fully functional writing system capable of recording the complete range of spoken language. The earliest Maya inscriptions combine logographic signs representing entire words with syllabic signs representing individual sounds, creating a flexible system that could accommodate complex grammatical structures and poetic expression. The development of Maya calendrical systems paralleled innovations in other Mesoamerican regions while achieving greater precision and complexity. Maya astronomers calculated the length of the solar year to within minutes of modern measurements and predicted eclipses with remarkable accuracy centuries in advance. The long count system, which may have originated in the Olmec region or developed independently among the Maya, provided a linear chronological framework that could record dates across thousands of years while integrating with cyclical calendars used for ritual and agricultural purposes. In central Mexico, the foundations of what would become Mesoamerica's greatest metropolis were being laid in the basin of Mexico's northeastern corner. Teotihuacan's origins remain partially obscured by later construction, but archaeological evidence indicates that substantial settlement began around 200 BC in response to volcanic activity that displaced populations from earlier centres in the region. The eruption of Zitl volcano around 50 BC buried Cuicuilco, previously the basin's largest settlement, forcing refugees to relocate to areas with reliable water sources and fertile agricultural land. Teotihuacan's location offered several advantages that would prove crucial for its later development into Mesoamerica's first true metropolis. Natural springs provided reliable water supplies throughout the year, while the surrounding valley contained extensive areas of fertile alluvial soil suitable for intensive agriculture. Nearby obsidian sources, particularly at Otumba and Pachuca, provided raw materials for tool production and long-distance trade. The site's position controlled access routes between the basin of Mexico and regions to the north and east, facilitating commercial and political connections across vast distances. The city's early development followed a carefully planned layout that would guide construction for over 6 centuries. The Street of the Dead, Teotihuacan's main ceremonial avenue, was laid out along a precise north-south axis, oriented 15.5 degrees east of true north. This orientation aligned the avenue with the setting of the Pleiades constellation, demonstrating astronomical knowledge and religious symbolism that connected urban planning with cosmic order. The avenue extended over 4 kilometers from the Pyramid of the Moon in the north to the Ciudadela complex in the south, creating one of ancient America's most impressive urban vistas. Construction of Teotihuacan's major pyramids began during the 1st century AD, representing massive investments of labour and resources that required coordinated planning and centralised authority. The Pyramid of the Sun, built over a natural cave that may have held religious significance, rises 65 metres above the surrounding plaza and contains approximately 1.2 million cubic metres of stone, adobe and fill. The pyramid's construction required quarrying and transporting millions of basalt blocks from sources several kilometres away, then precisely fitting these stones into a stable structure that has survived nearly 2 millennia of earthquakes and weathering. The Pyramid of the Moon, though smaller than its solar counterpart, demonstrates equally sophisticated engineering and astronomical alignment. The structure's 7 construction phases reflect continuous renovation and expansion over several centuries, with each phase incorporating new architectural elements and decorative programs. The pyramid's summit aligns with Cerro Gordo, a prominent peak visible from throughout the basin, creating visual connections between human-made architecture and natural landmarks that reinforced cosmological concepts central to Teotihuacan religion. Teotihuacan's residential areas developed according to a distinctive apartment compound system that housed the city's growing population in multifamily structures arranged around central courtyards. These compounds, constructed of stone and adobe with flat roofs supported by wooden beams, typically housed 100 individuals representing extended families or craft groups. Each compound included residential rooms, storage areas, workshops, and small temples or shrines that served the religious needs of their inhabitants. The standardized construction of these apartment compounds reflects centralized planning and resource allocation that distinguished Teotihuacan from contemporary Mesoamerican cities. Unlike other urban centers where elite residences clustered near ceremonial precincts while commoners lived in dispersed settlements, Teotihuacan integrated different social classes within a unified urban fabric. This integration may have reflected ideological commitments to social cohesion or practical considerations related to craft production and resource distribution. Religious practices during the formative period established fundamental patterns that would characterize Mesoamerican civilization throughout its existence. The ball game, played on specially constructed courts using solid rubber balls, became a central ritual activity connecting athletic competition with cosmic symbolism and religious sacrifice. Archaeological evidence indicates that ball courts were constructed at major centers throughout Mesoamerica by 1000 BC, with standardized playing surfaces and associated architectural complexes that indicate shared rules and symbolic meanings. The ball game's religious significance derived from mythological associations with the movement of celestial bodies and the cyclical nature of life and death. Players represented supernatural forces engaged in cosmic struggles, with game outcomes determining agricultural fertility, seasonal transitions, and the fate of human communities. The rubber ball symbolized the sun's daily journey across the sky, while the court's shape represented the portal between the earthly realm and the underworld through which the sun passed each night. Bloodletting rituals became increasingly elaborate during this period, with rulers and nobles performing auto-sacrifice using obsidian blades, stingray spines, and other sharp implements to pierce tongues, earlobes, and genitals. The blood offered to supernatural forces was believed to nourish the gods and maintain cosmic balance, while the altered states of consciousness induced by blood loss facilitated communication with ancestral spirits and divine beings. Archaeological evidence from elite burials includes numerous bloodletting implements made from precious materials, indicating the high status and religious importance of these practices. The concept of cyclical time, fundamental to all later Mesoamerican calendrical systems, achieved sophisticated expression during the formative period. Unlike linear time concepts that view history as a sequence of unique events, Mesoamerican temporal philosophy emphasized recurring patterns and cosmic cycles that repeated at multiple scales. The 260-day ritual calendar combined with a 365-day solar year to create 52-year cycles, while longer periods of 400 years and 8,000 years provided frameworks for historical and mythological chronology. The sophisticated urban planning principles established during Teotihuacan's formative centuries reached full expression during the city's classical period, when it emerged as the largest urban center in the pre-Columbian Americas. By 250 AD, the metropolis housed between 125,000 and 200,000 inhabitants within a carefully planned grid system covering over 20 square kilometers. This demographic concentration represented an unprecedented achievement in Mesoamerican urbanism, requiring administrative innovations, economic specialization, and social organization that would influence city planning throughout ancient Mexico for centuries. The Street of the Dead formed the spine of Teotihuacan's urban layout, extending 4.5 kilometers from the Pyramid of the Moon southward to the Great Compound. This monumental avenue, measuring 40 meters wide with raised sidewalks flanking a central depression, created dramatic ceremonial space while serving practical transportation needs. The avenue's designers incorporated subtle architectural features that enhanced its visual impact, including platforms and stairways that broke the sightlines into manageable segments while maintaining overall unity. Small pyramids and platform complexes lined both sides of the avenue, creating rhythmic architectural sequences that guided processional movement while providing venues for religious ceremonies and public gatherings. The Pyramid of the Sun dominated Teotihuacan's eastern skyline, its massive bulk rising 65 meters above the surrounding plaza in 4 terraced levels connected by steep stairways. Recent archaeological investigations have revealed that the pyramid was constructed over a natural cave extending 103 meters into the bedrock. with 4 chambers arranged in a cloverleaf pattern that may have represented the 4 cardinal directions in Teotihuacan cosmology. The cave's entrance, located directly beneath the pyramid's center, was artificially modified with stone-lined walls and drainage channels that suggest ritual use involving water ceremonies and offerings to underworld deities. Construction of the Pyramid of the Sun required sophisticated engineering knowledge and massive labor coordination. The structure contains approximately 1.2 million cubic meters of adobe bricks, stone and rubble fill, requiring an estimated 20,000 workers laboring for 2 decades to complete. Teotihuacan's architects developed innovative construction techniques, using a core of adobe bricks faced with stone slabs and finished with lime plaster painted in brilliant colours. The pyramid's 4 sides align precisely with the cardinal directions, while its base measurements of 225 metres square create proportional relationships that may have encoded astronomical or mathematical knowledge. The Pyramid of the Moon, though smaller than its solar counterpart, achieved greater architectural sophistication through its integration with the surrounding landscape and ceremonial complex. Rising 43 metres above the plaza level, the pyramid was constructed in 7 distinct phases between 100 and 450 AD, each expansion incorporating new architectural elements and burial offerings that illuminate Teotihuacan's evolving religious practices. The structure's northern face aligns with Cerro Gordo, a prominent mountain peak that may have held sacred significance as the source of water and agricultural fertility. Excavations within the Pyramid of the Moon have revealed elaborate burial chambers containing sacrificed individuals accompanied by obsidian blades, greenstone ornaments, and ceramic vessels. Burial 5, discovered in the pyramid's 4th construction phase, contained the remains of a richly adorned individual surrounded by 18 sacrificial victims arranged in specific patterns that may represent cosmological symbolism. The principal burial included over 400 objects made from jade, obsidian, shell, and other precious materials obtained through long-distance trade networks extending throughout Mesoamerica. The Avenue of the Dead's southern terminus was marked by the Ciudadela, a vast rectangular complex measuring 400 metres on each side and enclosed by 15-metre-high walls topped with temple platforms. This architectural ensemble served as Teotihuacan's administrative centre, housing government offices, elite residences, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, one of Mesoamerica's most iconographically complex religious structures. The Ciudadela's enclosed design created a controlled environment for state ceremonies and political activities while providing residential space for approximately 100,000 people within its various apartment compounds. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, also known as the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, represented the pinnacle of Teotihuacan sculptural achievement through its elaborate facade decorated with over 200 carved stone heads alternating between feathered serpents and a deity with goggle-like eyes and a reptilian snout. The feathered serpent heads, each weighing approximately 4 tons, project from the temple's sloping walls in 3-dimensional relief that creates dramatic shadow patterns throughout the day. These serpent sculptures display intricate carving that includes individual feather details, scaled skin textures, and ornamental elements that required master craftsmen working with specialized stone tools. The goggle-eyed deity heads, possibly representing an early form of Tlaloc, the rain god, feature distinctive circular eye coverings, fanged mouths, and elaborate headdresses decorated with geometric patterns and symbolic elements. Recent analysis has identified traces of brilliant pigments, including red cinnabar, blue azurite, and yellow ochre that originally covered the entire facade, creating a polychromatic display that would have been visible from great distances. The temple's iconographic program combines aquatic symbolism with warfare imagery, suggesting connections between religious authority, military power, and agricultural fertility that characterize Teotihuacan's political ideology. Archaeological investigations beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent have revealed mass burial deposits containing over 200 sacrificial victims, many of whom were warriors identified by their distinctive obsidian projectile points and military regalia. These individuals appear to have been captured enemies or willing participants in dedication ceremonies, their deaths sanctifying the temple's construction and ensuring divine protection for the city. The burials were arranged in specific patterns, with hands bound behind backs and accompanied by elaborate offerings including jade ornaments, obsidian blades, and ceramic vessels filled with organic materials. Teotihuacan's economic foundation rested on sophisticated obsidian production that supplied markets throughout Mesoamerica with cutting tools, weapons, and ritual implements. The city controlled access to high-quality obsidian sources at Pachuca, located 50 kilometers northeast in the state of Hidalgo, where volcanic glass deposits provided raw materials for specialized craft production. Pachuca obsidian was prized throughout ancient Mexico for its distinctive green color and superior flaking qualities that enabled production of extremely sharp blades and delicate ornamental objects. The merchant's barrio, located in the city's western sector, contained dozens of workshop complexes where skilled artisans transformed raw obsidian into finished products using sophisticated knapping techniques. Archaeological excavations have revealed production debris indicating that Teotihuacan craftsmen manufactured prismatic blades, bifacial knives, projectile points, and ceremonial objects in standardized forms that suggest mass production for export markets. A single workshop compound could produce thousands of obsidian blades per month, requiring coordination between raw material suppliers, skilled knappers, and distribution networks that extended across Mesoamerica. Quality control measures ensured that Teotihuacan obsidian products maintained consistent standards that made them preferred trade goods in distant markets. Master craftsmen developed specialized techniques for heat-treating obsidian to improve its flaking properties, while apprentice training programs transmitted technical knowledge across generations. The city's obsidian industry employed thousands of workers in various capacities, from quarry laborers and transporters to skilled artisans and merchant traders who carried finished products to markets throughout Mexico and Central America. Agricultural innovations supported Teotihuacan's large population through intensive farming systems that maximize productivity in the semi-arid basin of Mexico environment. The city's engineers constructed extensive irrigation networks that channeled water from natural springs and seasonal streams to agricultural fields surrounding the urban core. The San Juan River was canalized and diverted through a series of stone-lined channels that distributed water to terraced fields extending across the valley floor. Chinampas, or raised field systems, were constructed in permanently flooded areas where farmers built elevated planting surfaces surrounded by drainage canals. These artificial islands provided rich organic soil for intensive cultivation, while creating aquatic habitat for fish, waterfowl, and other protein sources that supplemented agricultural production. Chinampa construction required sophisticated understanding of hydrology and soil management, with farmers using organic materials including human waste, lake sediments, and decaying vegetation to build and maintain fertile growing surfaces. Teotihuacan's agricultural system also incorporated extensive terracing on hill slopes surrounding the valley, where stone retaining walls prevented soil erosion while creating level planting surfaces for rain-fed cultivation. These terraces required massive labour investments for construction and maintenance, but enabled cultivation of marginal lands that might otherwise have remained unproductive. Archaeological surveys have identified over 500 square kilometres of ancient terracing in the Teotihuacan Valley, indicating agricultural intensification that supported one of ancient America's largest urban populations. The city's political influence extended far beyond the basin of Mexico through diplomatic, military and commercial networks that connected Teotihuacan with major centres throughout Mesoamerica. Archaeological evidence indicates that Teotihuacan maintained direct political control or significant influence over sites as distant as Caminaljuyu in highland Guatemala and Monte Alban in Oaxaca. This influence was exercised through various mechanisms including military conquest, elite intermarriage, trade monopolies, and religious proselytizing that spread Teotihuacan cultural practices across vast distances. Caminaljuyu, located in the Valley of Guatemala, shows particularly strong Teotihuacan influence during the early Classic period. The site's acropolis was rebuilt according to Teotihuacan architectural principles, with tablero construction techniques and ceremonial layouts that directly copied central Mexican prototypes. Burial offerings at Caminaljuyu include large quantities of Teotihuacan-style ceramics, obsidian tools, and jade ornaments that indicate either direct political control or intensive cultural exchange between the two centers. Maya sites throughout the Petén region display varying degrees of Teotihuacan influence, with some centers adopting central Mexican architectural styles, iconographic programs, and ceramic traditions while maintaining distinctly Maya cultural identities. Tikal, the largest Maya city during the early Classic period, experienced significant Teotihuacan influence beginning around 378 AD, when a ruler named Siaj Kak arrived at the site, possibly as a Teotihuacan representative or ally. Subsequent Tikal rulers adopted Teotihuacan-style regalia, architectural elements, and military symbolism while continuing to use Maya hieroglyphic writing and calendrical systems. The nature of Teotihuacan's political influence remains debated among scholars, with some arguing for direct imperial control, while others propose less formal relationships based on trade partnerships and cultural exchange. Archaeological evidence suggests that Teotihuacan's influence varied considerably across different regions and time periods, with some areas showing intensive contact while others maintained greater independence. The city's power may have been exercised primarily through economic mechanisms, with control over obsidian production and distribution networks, providing leverage over distant communities that depended on Teotihuacan trade goods. Teotihuacan's religious system centered on the feathered serpent cult, which combined elements of earlier Mesoamerican traditions with innovations that would influence later civilizations throughout Mexico and Central America. The feathered serpent deity represented a complex synthesis of aquatic, celestial, and fertility symbolism that connected agricultural cycles with cosmic order and divine authority. Iconographic representations show the deity as a serpent covered with quetzal feathers, often associated with water, wind, and the planet Venus in its various astronomical manifestations. The cult's theological innovations included concepts of divine rulership that legitimized political authority through supernatural sanction, while providing ideological frameworks for territorial expansion and cultural integration. Teotihuacan rulers claimed divine descent from the feathered serpent, using religious authority to justify military campaigns and tribute collection while promoting cultural practices that unified diverse ethnic groups within the city's cosmopolitan population. Ritual practices associated with the feathered serpent cult included elaborate ceremonies involving bloodletting, human sacrifice, and offerings of precious materials including jade, obsidian, and exotic feathers. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent served as the focal point for these activities, with mass sacrificial events marking important calendrical cycles and political transitions. Archaeological evidence suggests that these ceremonies involved participants from throughout Mesoamerica, creating shared religious experiences that reinforced Teotihuacan's cultural influence across vast distances. The city's apartment compound system reflected religious principles that emphasize community solidarity and collective identity over individual achievement. Each compound included small temples or shrines where residents conducted daily religious observances, while larger ceremonial complexes served neighborhood and district-level communities. This decentralized religious organization allowed for cultural diversity within an overarching framework of shared beliefs and practices that maintained social cohesion despite the city's ethnic heterogeneity. Teotihuacan's artistic traditions achieved remarkable sophistication through mural painting programs that decorated both public buildings and private residences throughout the city. Over 120 painted structures have been identified, displaying iconographic programs that range from religious symbolism to secular scenes of daily life. The Tepantitla murals, discovered in a residential compound near the Pyramid of the Sun, depict a paradise-like realm where figures engage in various activities including ball playing, singing and ritual dancing beneath flowering trees and flowing streams. The Paradise of Tlaloc murals demonstrate sophisticated artistic techniques including perspective, colour gradation, and narrative composition that rival contemporary achievements in other world regions. Artists used mineral pigments including red hematite, yellow ochre, blue azurite, and green malachite to create brilliant polychromatic displays that covered entire wall surfaces. The painting process required specialized knowledge of pigment preparation, surface treatment, and application techniques that were transmitted through craft guilds and workshop training programs. Secular scenes from Teotihuacan provided artistic inspiration that would influence Maya painters for centuries, but the jungle cities emerging across the Petén lowlands developed their own distinctive traditions of monumental architecture, hieroglyphic writing, and divine kingship that surpassed even Teotihuacan's achievements in complexity and sophistication. The classic Maya period witnessed the florescence of dozens of independent city-states, each ruled by dynasties claiming supernatural authority while competing for territorial control, tribute collection, and prestige through warfare, diplomacy, and architectural grandeur that transformed the tropical rainforest into one of history's most densely urbanized landscapes. Tikal emerged as the most powerful Maya center during the early Classic period, its towering pyramid temples rising above the forest canopy like artificial mountains proclaiming royal authority across vast territories. The city's rulers trace their lineage to Yakzeb Suk, a semi-mythical founder who established the dynasty around 90 AD, though substantial monumental construction did not begin until the reign of Jasor Chankawilva in the 3rd century. Temple 4, completed during the 8th century, reached a height of 65 metres above the forest floor, making it one of the tallest pre-Columbian structures in the Americas and visible from neighbouring centres dozens of kilometres away. The political organisation of Maya city-states centred on the institution of divine kingship, where rulers claimed descent from supernatural ancestors and maintained cosmic order through ritual performance, military conquest, and architectural patronage. The Maya term Kuhulajor, meaning divine lord, designated these sacred monarchs who served as intermediaries between human communities and the supernatural realm. Royal authority derived not from secular political power alone, but from religious sanction that required constant validation through ceremonial activities, successful warfare, and the completion of monumental construction projects that demonstrated divine favour. Dynastic succession followed patrilineal principles, with elder sons typically inheriting royal titles and responsibilities, though political circumstances sometimes required alternative arrangements involving brothers, cousins, or even female rulers during transitional periods. Lady 6. Skye ruled Naranjo for over 60 years during the 7th and 8th centuries, commissioning numerous stelae celebrating her military victories and architectural achievements, while maintaining diplomatic relations with neighbouring centres through strategic marriage alliances and tribute agreements. Palenque developed distinctive architectural traditions that reflected local environmental conditions and cultural preferences while incorporating broader Maya design principles. The city's location on limestone terraces overlooking the Usumacinta River Valley provided natural defensive advantages and abundant water supplies, but required sophisticated engineering solutions for construction on sloping terrain. Palenque's architects developed innovative techniques using corbelled vaulting systems that created interior spaces of unprecedented size and elegance, while decorative programs combined stucco sculpture with painted murals that achieved remarkable artistic sophistication. The Temple of the Inscriptions housed the elaborate tomb of Jasochán Cahuil I, discovered by Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruiz-Luillier in 1952 after 4 years of excavation through rubble-filled passages leading deep into the pyramid's interior. The burial chamber, carved from solid limestone and sealed with a massive sarcophagus lid weighing over 5 tons, contained the ruler's remains surrounded by jade ornaments, obsidian blades, and ceramic vessels that accompanied his journey to the underworld. The sarcophagus lid displays one of Maya art's most complex iconographic programs, depicting the deceased king's transformation into the maize god, while falling into the jaws of the earth monster that symbolized death and regeneration. Hieroglyphic inscriptions covering the temple's interior walls record detailed historical information about Palenque's ruling dynasty, including birth dates, accession ceremonies, military campaigns, and architectural dedications spanning over 2 centuries. These texts demonstrate the sophistication of Maya historical consciousness and the importance of dynastic legitimacy and political competition between rival centers. The inscriptions employ full grammatical structures of ancient Mayan languages, recording not only names and dates but complex narrative accounts of royal activities and supernatural interactions. Copan emerged as the Maya world's premier center for astronomical observation and mathematical calculation, its scribal schools producing some of Mesoamerica's most sophisticated intellectual achievements. The city's hieroglyphic stairway contains over 2,500 individual glyphs arranged in 63 steps, creating the longest Maya inscription known to archaeology. This monumental text records the complete dynastic history of Copan's ruling lineage, while incorporating complex calendrical calculations that demonstrate advanced mathematical knowledge and astronomical precision. The city's bull court represents one of the finest examples of this distinctively Mesoamerican architectural form, with playing surfaces measuring 37 meters long and enclosed by sloping walls decorated with sculptural programs depicting the cosmic significance of the ritual game. 3 stone markers embedded in the court's floor display hieroglyphic inscriptions, recording the dedication ceremonies performed by Copan's rulers, while the court's acoustic properties amplify sounds in ways that may have enhanced the ritual drama of ball game performances. Copan's Acropolis complex demonstrates the sophisticated urban planning that characterized major Maya centers, with residential palaces, administrative buildings, and ceremonial structures arranged around interconnected courtyards that provided venues for different types of royal activities. The East Court served as a reception area for diplomatic visitors and tribute presentations, while the West Court functioned as a private residential space for the royal family and their immediate retainers. Elaborate drainage systems channeled rainwater through carved stone gutters that prevented flooding while creating decorative water features that enhanced the complex's aesthetic appeal. Maya mathematical achievements included the independent invention of the concept of zero, and the development of positional notation systems that enabled complex astronomical calculations. Maya mathematicians used a vigesimal counting system represented through combinations of dots and bars, with shell symbols indicating 0 values in positional notation. This mathematical system enabled calculations involving millions of days and precise predictions of astronomical events, including solar eclipses, lunar cycles, and planetary movements. The long count calendar provided Maya astronomers with a linear chronological framework capable of recording dates across thousands of years, while maintaining precise correlation with cyclical calendars used for ritual and agricultural purposes. Long count dates consist of 5 numerical positions, representing different temporal units: baktuns, katuns, tuns, winals, and kins. This system enabled Maya scribes to record historical events with unprecedented precision, while calculating future dates for ceremonial and astronomical purposes. Maya astronomical observations achieved remarkable accuracy through sustained programs of celestial monitoring conducted from specially constructed observatories. The caracol at Chichen Itza, built during the Terminal Classic period, features windows and doorways aligned with specific astronomical phenomena, including the extreme positions of Venus and the Moon's maximum declination. These alignments required precise surveying techniques and multi-generational observation programs that tracked celestial movements across decades or centuries. Venus held particular significance in Maya astronomy and religious practice, with its synodic cycle of 584 days providing the basis for warfare scheduling and ceremonial timing. Maya astronomers calculated Venus's cycle with extraordinary precision, determining its average length as 583.92 days compared to the modern astronomical value of 583.93 days. The Dresden Codex contains Venus tables that predict the planet's heliacal rising dates across centuries, enabling rulers to coordinate military campaigns and religious ceremonies with favourable astronomical conditions. Lunar calculations displayed similar precision, with Maya astronomers determining the average lunar month as 29.53020 days, compared to the modern value of 29.53059 days. These calculations enabled accurate prediction of lunar eclipses and coordination of agricultural activities with lunar phases that were believed to influence plant growth and human fertility. The Palenque cross-group inscriptions contain lunar series calculations that demonstrate mathematical sophistication rivaling contemporary achievements in other world regions. Maya hieroglyphic writing evolved from earlier Mesoamerican symbolic traditions, but achieved unprecedented complexity through the integration of logographic and syllabic elements in fully grammatical texts. Maya scribes used approximately 800 distinct hieroglyphic signs, including logograms representing complete words, syllabograms representing individual sounds, and determinatives that clarified meaning or pronunciation. This mixed writing system enabled the recording of complete spoken language with grammatical structures, verb conjugations, and syntactic relationships that provide detailed insight into ancient Maya thought and expression. The decipherment of Maya hieroglyphic writing, achieved primarily during the second half of the 20th century through the collaborative efforts of scholars including Yuri Norisov, Tatiana Proskoryakov, and David Stewart, revolutionized understanding of Maya civilization by revealing the historical and literary content of monumental inscriptions and codex manuscripts. These texts record not only royal genealogies and historical events, but also mythological narratives, astronomical calculations, and ritual prescriptions that illuminate Maya religious beliefs and intellectual achievements. Maya scribes received extensive training in specialized schools attached to royal courts, where they mastered not only hieroglyphic writing but also mathematical calculation, astronomical observation, and ritual performance. The profession carried high social status and political influence, with master scribes serving as advisors to rulers and guardians of esoteric knowledge essential for maintaining cosmic order and political legitimacy. Scribal signatures appear on numerous monuments and codices, indicating individual pride in intellectual achievement and competition for recognition among literate elites. The Popol Vuh, though recorded in alphabetic script during the colonial period, preserves ancient Maya mythological traditions that illuminate classic period religious beliefs and cosmological concepts. This epic narrative describes the creation of the world through multiple cosmic cycles, the adventures of the hero twins in their struggle against underworld deities, and the emergence of humanity from maize dough shaped by divine hands. Archaeological iconographic programs at sites throughout the Maya region depict scenes from these mythological narratives, demonstrating the widespread cultural significance of these traditional stories. Maya architectural innovations included the perfection of corbelled arch construction techniques that enabled the creation of interior spaces without the use of true arches or wooden support beams. Maya architects achieved this through carefully calculated stone placement that gradually narrowed wall openings until capstones could bridge the remaining gaps, creating structurally sound vaults that could support substantial roof loads. The technique required precise stone cutting and mathematical knowledge of load distribution, with master builders developing regional variations that reflected local preferences and material availability. Pyramid temple complexes served as the focal points of Maya ceremonial centres, with steep-sided platforms supporting summit shrines that housed sacred objects and provided venues for royal ritual performance. These structures typically featured elaborate sculptural programs including carved masks, hieroglyphic inscriptions, and mythological scenes that proclaimed royal authority and cosmic connections. Temple facades often incorporated representations of supernatural beings, including the maize god, the sun god, and various aspects of the rain deity Chark, whose intervention was essential for agricultural success and community prosperity. Palace complexes provided residential and administrative space for royal families while serving as venues for diplomatic reception, tribute collection, and judicial activities. Maya palaces typically consisted of multiple buildings arranged around courtyards, with residential quarters, audience halls, and storage facilities integrated into unified architectural compositions. These structures featured sophisticated ventilation systems, interior courtyards that provided natural lighting, and elaborate decorative programs that demonstrated royal wealth and artistic patronage. Ball courts appeared at virtually every major Maya centre, with playing surfaces measuring between 20 and 50 metres in length, and enclosed by sloping walls that returned the solid rubber ball to players during ritual competitions. The court's acoustic properties amplified sounds throughout the ceremonial precinct, while associated sculptural programs depicted the cosmic significance of the ball game as a metaphor for celestial movements and seasonal cycles. Archaeological evidence suggests that ball game outcomes sometimes determined the fate of captive warriors, with losing players or defeated enemies sacrificed to ensure divine favour and agricultural fertility. Calakmul emerged during the late Classic period as Tikal's primary rival, controlling extensive territories in the central Peton, while maintaining diplomatic and military relationships with dozens of smaller centres throughout the Maya lowlands. The city's rulers adopted the title Snake Kings and commissioned numerous monuments celebrating their military victories and territorial conquests. Structure 2 at Calakmul rises 45 metres above the surrounding plaza and contains over 1.2 million cubic metres of stone and fill, making it one of the largest pyramids in the Maya world by volume. The political competition between Tikal and Calakmul shaped Maya history during the 6th through 8th centuries, with both centres seeking to expand their territorial control through military conquest, diplomatic alliance, and economic domination of trade routes connecting the Maya lowlands with highland Mexico and the Pacific coast. This rivalry involved dozens of smaller centres that served as allies or vassals to the major powers, creating complex networks of political obligation and military cooperation that extended across hundreds of kilometres. Warfare played a crucial role in Maya political competition, with rulers conducting regular military campaigns to capture prisoners for sacrifice, collect tribute from defeated enemies, and demonstrate divine favour through battlefield success. Maya warfare emphasised the capture of high-ranking enemies rather than territorial occupation, with victorious rulers displaying bound captives on monumental sculptures and incorporating their names into hieroglyphic inscriptions that celebrated royal achievements. Archaeological evidence indicates that warfare intensified during the late Classic period, possibly contributing to the political fragmentation and demographic decline that characterized the terminal Classic period. Human sacrifice formed an integral component of Maya religious practice, with various forms of ritual killing performed to nourish supernatural forces and maintain cosmic balance. Royal bloodletting ceremonies involved rulers and nobles piercing their tongues, earlobes and genitals with obsidian blades or stingray spines, collecting the blood on bark paper that was then burned to carry offerings to the gods. More extreme forms of sacrifice included heart extraction, drowning and flaying, with different methods employed for specific ritual purposes and calendrical occasions. The Maya collapse, beginning around 800 AD and continuing through the 9th century, involved the abandonment of major centres throughout the southern lowlands and the cessation of monumental construction and hieroglyphic inscription. Multiple factors contributed to this demographic and political crisis, including environmental degradation, warfare intensification, climate change, and the breakdown of trade networks that had sustained Classic period prosperity. Archaeological evidence suggests that deforestation and soil erosion reduced agricultural productivity, while prolonged droughts stressed water supplies and forced population movements that destabilized political relationships. Despite the southern lowland collapse, Maya civilization continued to flourish in northern Yucatan and highland Guatemala, where centers like Chichen Itza and Mayapan maintained urban populations and monumental construction programs through the post-Classic period. These northern centers developed distinctive architectural styles and political organizations that incorporated influences from central Mexico while maintaining recognizably Maya cultural traditions. The persistence of Maya civilization through multiple periods of political transformation demonstrates the adaptability and resilience of cultural systems that had evolved over more than 2 millennia of continuous development. The monumental achievements of Classic period Maya civilization represented the pinnacle of one regional tradition. But across Mesoamerica during the 7th through 9th centuries AD, fundamental transformations were reshaping political, economic, and cultural landscapes in ways that would define the region's subsequent development. The collapse of Teotihuacan around 650 AD created a power vacuum in central Mexico that triggered widespread population movements, the emergence of new regional centers, and the militarization of societies that had previously emphasized religious authority and commercial exchange over territorial conquest and warrior prowess. Archaeological evidence from the Teotihuacan Valley reveals systematic destruction of the great metropolis through coordinated burning that targeted administrative buildings, elite residences, and religious complexes while leaving many residential areas relatively intact. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was deliberately defaced, its sculptural facades smashed and buried beneath layers of rubble that suggest ritualized termination rather than random violence. Apartment compounds throughout the city show evidence of hasty abandonment, with valuable objects left in place and storage rooms sealed as if inhabitants expected to return after temporary displacement. The causes of Teotihuacan's collapse remain debated among scholars, but multiple factors likely contributed to the crisis that ended 6 centuries of urban prosperity. Climate data indicates that the 7th century experienced increased aridity in central Mexico, reducing agricultural productivity and straining water resources that supported the city's massive population. Internal social tensions may have intensified as economic pressures mounted, while external military threats from northern groups seeking access to agricultural lands and trade routes placed additional stress on Teotihuacan's political system. The power vacuum created by Teotihuacan's fall enabled the rise of new regional centers that developed distinctive cultural syntheses, combining Classic period traditions with innovations reflecting changed political and economic circumstances. Xochicalco emerged in the hills of western Morelos as one of the most significant post-Teotihuacan centers, its strategic location controlling trade routes between central Mexico and regions to the south and west. The site's founders chose a naturally defensible hilltop position that required extensive terracing and fortification, indicating that military considerations had become paramount in urban planning decisions. Xochicalco's Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent demonstrates sophisticated architectural planning and iconographic innovation that synthesized influences from multiple Mesoamerican traditions. The structure's talud tablero construction technique derived from Teotihuacan architectural principles, but its sculptural program incorporated Maya-style hieroglyphic inscriptions, Zapotec calendrical symbols, and Gulf Coast iconographic elements that suggest intensive cultural exchange during the site's construction around 700 AD. The pyramid's facades display carved reliefs depicting seated figures wearing elaborate headdresses and manipulating calendrical symbols, possibly representing a pan-Mesoamerican conference of astronomers and rulers convened to correlate different regional calendar systems. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent sculptural program includes representations of the deity emerging from conch shells, surrounded by undulating serpent bodies covered with feathers rendered in intricate detail. These reliefs demonstrate technical mastery that rivals the finest classic period achievements, while introducing new stylistic elements that would influence later Mesoamerican art. The feathered serpent motifs incorporate stellar symbols and calendrical glyphs that connect the deity with astronomical phenomena and temporal calculation, reinforcing the association between religious authority and specialized knowledge that characterized post-classic political systems. Xochicalco's ball court represents another architectural innovation that reflects the period's emphasis on ritual competition and military symbolism. The playing surface measures 43 meters in length and features sloping walls decorated with relief sculptures depicting ball players wearing protective gear and manipulating flaming balls that may represent astronomical bodies. The court's acoustic properties amplify sounds throughout the ceremonial precinct, while sightlines connect the playing area with the surrounding temple platforms, where spectators could observe the ritual competitions that determined political alliances and tribute obligations. The site's residential areas reveal evidence of craft specialization and long-distance trade that sustained Xochicalco's prosperity during the 8th and 9th centuries. Workshop areas contain production debris from obsidian tool manufacture, ceramic production, and textile weaving that supplied both local needs and export markets. Imported materials including marine shells from both Pacific and Gulf coasts, jade from Guatemala, and turquoise from northern Mexico indicate that Xochicalco maintained extensive commercial networks despite the political fragmentation that followed Teotihuacan's collapse. Cacaxtla emerged in the Tlaxcala Valley as another major epiclassic center, its rulers commissioning some of Mesoamerica's most sophisticated mural painting programs to decorate palace walls and ceremonial structures. The site's location on a hilltop overlooking fertile agricultural land provided both defensive advantages and symbolic significance, while its proximity to obsidian sources and trade routes facilitated economic prosperity. Cacaxtla's political organization appears to have emphasized military leadership and warrior cults that differed markedly from earlier Central Mexican traditions of priest-ruler authority. The battle mural at Cacaxtla depicts a complex military scene featuring warriors dressed in jaguar and eagle costumes, engaged in combat with enemies wearing different regional styles of military regalia. The painting's technical sophistication includes perspective effects, anatomical accuracy, and color gradations that demonstrate artistic knowledge comparable to contemporary achievements in other world regions. Individual warrior figures display distinct facial features, body proportions, and equipment details that suggest portraiture rather than generic representation, indicating that the mural commemorated specific historical events rather than mythological narratives. The victorious warriors in the battle mural wear jaguar pelts and eagle feather costumes that identify them with animal spirits associated with military prowess and supernatural power. These figures carry around shields decorated with astronomical symbols and weapons, including obsidian-edged clubs, atlatls, and darts that represent the standard equipment of Mesoamerican warfare during this period. The defeated enemies display different costume styles and equipment that may identify them with specific ethnic groups or political entities, suggesting that Cacaxtla's rulers commemorated victories over multiple opponents in coordinated military campaigns. Additional murals at Cacaxtla depict merchants and traders carrying bundles of goods along roads marked with footprint symbols that indicate long-distance travel. These commercial scenes include representations of cacao beans, textiles, obsidian tools, and precious stones that illustrate the diversity of goods circulating through epiclassic trade networks. The merchants wear distinctive costume elements, including turbans, sandals, and carrying equipment that identify them as members of specialized trading groups similar to the later Aztec Pochteca, who conducted commercial expeditions throughout Mesoamerica. The merchant mural's iconographic program includes calendar symbols and astronomical references that connect commercial activities with ritual timing and religious sanction. Dates recorded in the mural correspond to specific positions of Venus and other celestial bodies that were considered favorable for initiating trading expeditions and conducting market transactions. This integration of astronomical knowledge with commercial practice reflects the sophisticated understanding of temporal cycles that characterized Mesoamerican economic systems and the religious significance attributed to material exchange. El Tajin emerged on the Gulf Coast as the period's most architecturally innovative centre, its builders developing distinctive construction techniques and decorative programs that synthesized local traditions with influences from throughout Mesoamerica. The site's location in the tropical lowlands of northern Veracruz provided access to diverse environmental resources, including rubber, cacao, vanilla, and exotic feathers that were highly valued in long-distance trade networks. El Tajin's rulers exploited these natural advantages while developing military capabilities that enabled territorial expansion and tribute collection from surrounding communities. The Pyramid of the Niches at El Tajin represents one of Mesoamerica's most distinctive architectural achievements through its innovative use of geometric patterns and symbolic numerology. The structure rises in 7 terraced levels decorated with 365 square niches that correspond to the days of the solar year, while additional architectural elements reference the 260-day ritual calendar and other temporal cycles fundamental to Mesoamerican religious practice. The pyramid's construction required precise mathematical calculation and sophisticated understanding of proportional relationships that demonstrate advanced architectural knowledge. Each niche in the pyramid's facade was originally painted in brilliant colours and may have contained offerings or ceremonial objects related to specific calendar positions or religious observances. The niche's arrangement creates complex shadow patterns that change throughout the day and across seasons, possibly serving as a monumental calendar that enabled precise tracking of temporal cycles important for agricultural and ceremonial timing. The pyramid's summit temple contained additional calendrical references, including carved panels depicting dates and astronomical symbols that reinforced the structure's function as a temporal monument. El Tajin's ball courts represent the most elaborate examples of this architectural form known from ancient Mesoamerica, with 11 courts of varying sizes and decorative programs that illustrate the ritual game's central importance in Gulf Coast religious practice. The South Ball Court features relief sculptures depicting the decapitation of ball players, with blood streams transforming into serpents that nourish flowering plants, illustrating the connection between ritual sacrifice and agricultural fertility that underlay Mesoamerican religious concepts. The ball court reliefs at El Tajín demonstrate sophisticated narrative composition and iconographic complexity that rivals contemporary Maya achievements in sculptural art. Individual panels depict specific moments in ritual sequences, with players wearing protective hip yokes and manipulating solid rubber balls, while supernatural beings observe from architectural frames that represent cosmic boundaries. The court's acoustic properties amplify sounds in ways that may have enhanced the ritual drama of ball game performances, while sightlines connect playing areas with surrounding temple platforms where spectators could observe the competitions that determined political and religious outcomes. The militarization of Mesoamerican society during the Epiclassic period reflected fundamental changes in political organization and territorial competition that distinguished this era from earlier emphasis on religious authority and commercial exchange. Fortified hilltop settlements became common throughout central Mexico, with defensive walls, moats, and strategic positioning indicating that warfare had become a constant threat requiring permanent military preparations. Warrior imagery dominated artistic programs at sites throughout the region, with sculptures and murals depicting armed figures, military equipment, and battle scenes that celebrated martial prowess and conquest achievements. The emergence of warrior cults represented a significant shift in religious practice and social organization, with military brotherhoods replacing earlier priest-ruler hierarchies as the dominant political institutions. These warrior societies emphasized personal valor, battlefield success, and the capture of enemies for sacrifice, creating competitive systems that rewarded individual achievement while maintaining group solidarity through shared ritual practices. Archaeological evidence indicates that warrior cult members received distinctive burial treatment with military equipment, trophy skulls, and sacrificial victims that demonstrated their elevated social status. Weapon technology evolved significantly during this period, with innovations in projectile points, cutting tools, and protective equipment that enhanced military effectiveness while requiring specialized craft knowledge for production and maintenance. Obsidian-edge clubs became standard infantry weapons, their razor-sharp blades capable of inflicting devastating wounds while remaining relatively lightweight and maneuverable in close combat. Atlatl dart throwers provided long-range striking capability, with skilled warriors achieving accuracy and penetration power that rivaled later European crossbow technology. The expansion of long-distance trade networks during the Epiclassic period created new opportunities for wealth accumulation and social mobility that challenged traditional elite hierarchies based on hereditary status and religious authority. Merchant classes emerged as significant political forces, their commercial success enabling patronage of architectural projects, artistic commissions, and military expeditions that competed with royal authority for community leadership. These merchant groups developed distinctive cultural practices, religious observances, and social institutions that paralleled but remained separate from traditional noble hierarchies. Cacao beans achieved widespread acceptance as standardized currency during this period, facilitating commercial transactions across cultural and linguistic boundaries, while providing a stable medium of exchange for both local and long-distance trade. The beans' natural properties made them ideal for monetary use. They were durable, portable, divisible into small units, and possessed intrinsic value as raw material for chocolate preparation. Archaeological evidence indicates that cacao cultivation expanded significantly during the Epiclassic period, with specialized production areas in tropical lowlands supplying beans for circulation throughout Mesoamerica. The standardization of cacao currency required sophisticated systems of quality control, authentication, and exchange rate calculation that demonstrate advanced commercial organization. Merchants developed techniques for evaluating bean quality, detecting counterfeits, and maintaining accurate counts during large transactions. Market regulations ensured fair exchange rates between cacao and other goods, while specialized storage facilities protected valuable bean supplies from moisture, pests, and theft that could devastate commercial ventures. Cotton textiles emerged as another major trade commodity, with specialized production centers developing distinctive weaving techniques, dyeing processes, and decorative programs that created regional style preferences and quality hierarchies. The cultivation of cotton expanded into new ecological zones during this period, while technological innovations in spinning and weaving equipment increased productivity and enabled more complex textile designs. Archaeological remains of cotton textiles from dry cave sites demonstrate sophisticated patterning, color combinations, and construction techniques that required specialized knowledge and considerable time investment. Textile production involved extensive labor networks that connected cotton cultivators, fiber processors, dyers, weavers, and merchants in complex economic relationships spanning multiple communities and environmental zones. Women typically controlled household textile production, while specialized workshops produced luxury fabrics for elite consumption and long-distance trade. The social and economic importance of textile production is reflected in religious iconography that depicts goddesses associated with weaving and spinning, while archaeological evidence indicates that textile tools and raw materials were included in elite burial assemblages as symbols of wealth and status. The cultural synthesis characteristic of the Epiclassic period produced artistic innovations that combined classic period traditions with new influences from northern Mexico and other regions experiencing population movement and cultural change. Metallurgy appeared in Mesoamerica during this period, with copper bells, needles, and ornamental objects demonstrating technological knowledge transmitted from South American sources through long-distance trade networks. While metal tools remained rare and primarily ceremonial, their presence indicates expanding cultural horizons and technological experimentation that would accelerate during subsequent periods. Architectural innovations included the development of new construction techniques, decorative programs, and urban planning principles that reflected changed political priorities and cultural preferences. The use of columns became more common, enabling the creation of larger interior spaces and more complex building layouts. Sculptural programs incorporated new iconographic elements, including astronomical symbols, calendrical references, and narrative scenes that demonstrated sophisticated intellectual achievements while serving political and religious functions. The period's ceramic traditions show remarkable regional variation, combined with evidence of intensive cultural exchange that distributed stylistic innovations across vast distances. Fine paste ceramics produced in the Maya region appeared at sites throughout Mexico, while central Mexican ceramic styles influenced pottery production in areas previously dominated by local traditions. This ceramic evidence indicates that commercial networks facilitated not only the exchange of finished goods, but also the transmission of technical knowledge and artistic preferences that created increasingly cosmopolitan material culture. The cultural transformations of the Epiclassic period set the stage for the emergence of the Toltec civilization, which would establish itself as the dominant force in post-classic Mesoamerica, while creating political and religious precedents that would echo through the region's history until the Spanish conquest. Rising from the ashes of Teotihuacan's collapsed empire, the Toltecs constructed a new model of Mesoamerican civilization that emphasized military prowess, long-distance trade, and the systematic exportation of cultural practices across unprecedented geographical distances. Tula emerged as the Toltec capital around 900 AD in the northern reaches of the Basin of Mexico, approximately 65 kilometers northwest of where Teotihuacan's ruins lay, abandoned and overgrown. The site's founders chose a location that commanded strategic advantages over surrounding territories, while providing access to obsidian sources, agricultural land, and trade routes connecting central Mexico with northern regions that had previously remained peripheral to Mesoamerican civilization. Unlike earlier urban centres that developed gradually through population aggregation and economic specialisation, Tula appears to have been established as a planned capital designed to project military power and political authority across vast distances. The city's core ceremonial precinct covered approximately 14 square kilometres and housed an estimated 30,000 to 60,000 inhabitants at its peak during the 11th and 12th centuries. Tula's urban layout followed principles established at Teotihuacan, but incorporated significant modifications that reflected changed political priorities and military requirements. The main ceremonial plaza measured 140 metres on each side, surrounded by pyramid temples, palace complexes, and administrative buildings arranged according to astronomical alignments that connected earthly architecture with celestial movements fundamental to Toltec religious practice. Temple B, known as the Temple of Tlahuizcalpantecutli, or the Temple of the Morning Star, dominated Tula's skyline and served as the primary venue for royal ceremonies and religious observances. The pyramid rose in 5 terraced levels to a height of 10 metres, supporting a summit temple decorated with relief sculptures depicting jaguars, eagles, coyotes, and feathered serpents consuming human hearts. These iconographic programs established visual connections between military conquest, ritual sacrifice, and cosmic order that became central to Toltec political ideology and religious practice. The temple's most distinctive architectural feature consisted of massive stone columns carved in the form of warriors standing at attention, with atlatls, obsidian-edged clubs, and round shields decorated with astronomical symbols. These Atlantean figures, measuring 4.6 metres in height, originally supported wooden roof beams that covered the summit shrine, creating interior space for royal ceremonies and sacred object storage. Each warrior column displays individualised facial features, costume details, and equipment variations that suggest portraiture of specific military leaders or supernatural beings associated with warfare and conquest. The Toltec warrior columns established an architectural tradition that would spread throughout Mesoamerica during the following centuries, appearing at sites from Chichen Itza in Yucatan to Mitla in Oaxaca. The column's iconographic program emphasized military themes through detailed representation of weapons, protective gear, and warrior costume elements that celebrated martial prowess, while providing practical information about Toltec military technology and organization. Butterfly pectorals, feathered headdresses, and geometric textile patterns carved on the columns demonstrate the sophisticated material culture associated with Toltec warrior elites. Adjacent to Temple B, the burned palace complex provided residential and administrative space for Tula's ruling elite, while serving as a venue for diplomatic reception, tribute collection, and judicial activities. The palace's columned halls could accommodate hundreds of participants during state ceremonies, while private residential areas featured sophisticated architectural amenities, including interior courtyards, drainage systems, and decorated wall surfaces that demonstrated royal wealth and artistic patronage. Archaeological evidence indicates that the palace was deliberately burned during Tula's violent destruction around 1200 AD, with roof collapse preserving carbonized wooden beams that provide precise dates for the city's final occupation. The palace's mural painting programs, though fragmentary, reveal sophisticated artistic traditions that combined Toltec innovations with influences from throughout Mesoamerica. Surviving wall paintings depict processions of warriors, tribute bearers, and supernatural beings rendered in polychromatic compositions that rival contemporary achievements in other world regions. The mural's iconographic content includes representations of the feathered serpent deity, jaguar warriors, and astronomical symbols that illustrate the integration of military, religious, and calendrical themes characteristic of Toltec political ideology. Toltec military organizations centered on warrior societies that recruited members from throughout Mesoamerica, while maintaining ethnic diversity within unified command structures. Archaeological evidence indicates that Tula housed populations representing multiple cultural traditions, with residential areas containing ceramic assemblages, architectural styles, and burial practices derived from Maya, Zapotec, Gulf Coast, and northern Mexican sources. This cosmopolitan character reflected the Toltec success in integrating conquered populations and immigrant groups into expanding political and economic systems. The jaguar and eagle warrior societies, later adopted by the Aztecs, originated during the Toltec period as military brotherhoods that combined battlefield training with religious initiation and social advancement opportunities. These organizations recruited promising young men from diverse backgrounds, providing military education, weapons training, and ideological indoctrination that created loyalty to Toltec political institutions rather than ethnic or regional identities. Successful warriors could achieve high social status and economic rewards regardless of their origins, creating meritocratic elements within hierarchical political systems. Toltec weaponry incorporated technological innovations that enhanced military effectiveness while requiring specialized craft knowledge for production and maintenance. Obsidian-edged makuahuitl clubs became the standard infantry weapon, their wooden cores embedded with razor-sharp volcanic glass blades that could decapitate enemies or inflict devastating cutting wounds. The weapon's effectiveness depended on precise blade placement and secure adhesive techniques that required master craftsmen working with specialized tools and materials obtained through long-distance trade networks. Atlatl dart throwers achieved new levels of sophistication during the Toltec period, with carved wooden shafts, shell or bone hooks, and decorative elements that combined functional efficiency with artistic elaboration. Skilled warriors could achieve accuracy and penetration power at ranges exceeding 100 meters, providing tactical advantages in open-field combat while maintaining effectiveness in siege warfare against fortified positions. The Atlatl's mechanical advantage enabled relatively small projectiles to achieve velocities and impact forces comparable to later European crossbow bolts. Round shields constructed from woven reeds or wooden slats covered with animal hide provided protection against projectile weapons while remaining light enough for mobile combat operations. Shield decorations included featherwork designs, painted symbols, and metal ornaments that identified warrior rank, military unit affiliation, and supernatural patronage. Archaeological examples demonstrate sophisticated manufacturing techniques that balance protective capability with mobility requirements essential for Toltec military tactics. The legend of Acatl Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl represents one of Mesoamerica's most complex mythological narratives, combining historical events with religious symbolism in ways that illuminate Toltec political ideology and cultural transmission processes. According to later Aztec sources, Acatl Topiltzin was born in 947 AD as the son of Mixcoatl, a Toltec military leader who conquered territories throughout central Mexico. The prince received religious training that emphasized peaceful governance, artistic patronage, and ritual observance rather than military conquest and human sacrifice. Topiltzin's accession as ruler of Tula around 980 AD initiated a golden age of prosperity and cultural achievement that lasted approximately 2 decades. During his reign, the city's craftsmen achieved unprecedented sophistication in metallurgy, featherwork, textile production, and architectural decoration that established Toltec material culture as the standard of excellence throughout Mesoamerica. The ruler's emphasis on religious devotion and peaceful governance attracted pilgrims and immigrants from distant regions, creating the cosmopolitan character that distinguished Tula from earlier Mesoamerican urban centers. The mythological narrative describes increasing conflict between Topiltzin and rival factions that favored traditional military practices including human sacrifice and territorial expansion through warfare. The god Tezcatlipoca, representing these militaristic tendencies, allegedly corrupted the peaceful ruler through trickery that forced him to violate religious vows and abandon his commitment to non-violent governance. Overcome with shame, Topiltzin abdicated his throne and departed Tula with loyal followers, travelling eastward toward the Gulf Coast where he either died or transformed into the planet Venus. Archaeological evidence suggests that this mythological account preserves memories of actual political conflicts that occurred at Tula during the late 10th or early 11th centuries. Stratigraphic excavations reveal destruction episodes followed by architectural modifications that may represent changes in ruling dynasties or political systems. The burned palace shows evidence of deliberate termination followed by reconstruction according to different architectural principles, possibly indicating the victory of militaristic factions over peaceful governance advocates. The historical Topiltzin's identification with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity, reflects the Toltec synthesis of political authority with religious symbolism that would influence Mesoamerican kingship concepts for centuries. Rulers throughout the region claimed descent from or spiritual connection with Quetzalcoatl, using this association to legitimize political authority while promoting cultural practices derived from Toltec precedents. The deity's complex symbolism combined elements of wind, rain, fertility, and wisdom that connected royal governance with cosmic order and agricultural prosperity. Quetzalcoatl's role as patron of merchants, craftsmen, and artists reflected Toltec economic priorities and the importance of specialized production in maintaining political power and territorial control. The deity's association with Venus provided astronomical foundations for calendrical calculations, military campaign timing, and ceremonial scheduling that integrated religious practice with practical governance requirements. These connections between divine authority, economic activity, and temporal calculation became fundamental to later Mesoamerican political systems. The Toltec expansion into Maya territories represents one of the most significant episodes of cultural transmission in Mesoamerican history, fundamentally transforming political organization, architectural traditions, and religious practices throughout the Yucatan Peninsula. Around 950 AD, groups associated with Toltec political and military systems established control over Chichen Itza, previously a relatively minor Maya center, transforming it into one of Mesoamerica's most architecturally sophisticated cities, while creating new syntheses of Central Mexican and Maya cultural traditions. Chichen Itza's transformation under Toltec influence involved massive construction programs that introduced Central Mexican architectural elements while adapting them to local environmental conditions and cultural preferences. The Great Ball Court, measuring 168 meters in length and 70 meters in width, became the largest playing surface in ancient Mesoamerica while incorporating acoustic properties that amplified sounds throughout the ceremonial precinct. Relief sculptures decorating the court's walls depict ball game scenes with iconographic elements derived from both Toltec and Maya traditions, illustrating the cultural synthesis that characterized the site's development. The Temple of Kukulkan, Chichen Itza's most famous pyramid, demonstrates sophisticated integration of Toltec architectural principles with Maya mathematical and astronomical knowledge. The structure rises in 9 terraced levels with staircases on all 4 sides, creating a total of 365 steps that correspond to the days of the solar year. During spring and autumn equinoxes, shadow patterns on the northern staircase create the illusion of a serpent descending from the pyramid's summit to its base, connecting architectural design with astronomical phenomena in ways that celebrated both Toltec religious symbolism and Maya calendrical precision. The pyramid's interior contains an earlier Maya structure featuring a red-painted jaguar throne decorated with jade inlays and shell ornaments that demonstrate the continuity of local artistic traditions within Toltec political frameworks. This architectural palimpsest illustrates the complex processes through which Toltec cultural elements were integrated with existing Maya practices, rather than simply replacing them. The result was a distinctive regional synthesis that maintained recognizable connections to both cultural traditions while creating new forms of expression. The Temple of the Warriors at Chichen Itza directly copied architectural elements from Tula's Temple B, including Atlantean warrior columns, relief sculptures depicting military themes, and summit shrine layouts that served similar ceremonial functions. However, Maya craftsmen adapted these Central Mexican prototypes to local construction techniques and decorative preferences, using limestone masonry instead of volcanic stone, while incorporating Maya-style sculptural details and proportional relationships. The temple's 1,000-columns complex provided covered space for large assemblies while demonstrating the architectural innovations that enabled Toltec-Maya political integration. Chacmul sculptures, representing reclining figures holding offering bowls on their abdomens, became characteristic features of Toltec-influenced sites throughout Mesoamerica. These monumental sculptures served as receptacles for human hearts and other sacrificial offerings during religious ceremonies, their standardized form indicating shared ritual practices and iconographic meanings across vast geographical distances. The Chacmul's distinctive pose, with heads turned 90 degrees from their bodies, may have represented the transition between life and death, or the communication between earthly and supernatural realms. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza became a pilgrimage destination that attracted visitors from throughout Mesoamerica, who cast offerings of gold, jade, obsidian, and other precious materials into the natural limestone sinkhole. Dredging operations conducted during the early 20th century recovered thousands of artifacts, including gold discs decorated with repousse scenes depicting Toltec Maya military campaigns, ritual activities, and mythological narratives. These objects demonstrate the wealth that flowed through Chichen Itza's commercial networks, while illustrating the artistic synthesis that characterized Toltec-influenced material culture. The gold discs from the sacred cenote display sophisticated metalworking techniques that may have been transmitted from South American sources through long-distance trade networks. Repousse decoration required specialized knowledge of metal properties, heating techniques, and tool use that indicates either immigrant craftsmen or intensive technological transfer. The disc's iconographic programs combine Central Mexican and Maya symbolic elements in narrative compositions that celebrate military victories, royal ceremonies, and supernatural interactions. Toltec architectural innovations spread throughout Mesoamerica during the 10th through 12th centuries, creating a distinctive international style that combined functional efficiency with symbolic elaboration. Columned halls became standard features at major centers from Tula to Mitla, enabling the construction of large interior spaces suitable for administrative activities, diplomatic reception, and ceremonial gatherings. The columns' standardized proportions and decorative programs created visual unity across diverse regional contexts, while demonstrating shared cultural values and political connections. The use of Chacmul sculptures, Atlantean columns, and feathered serpent imagery became widespread during this period, appearing at sites throughout central Mexico, the Maya region, and as far south as El Salvador. This iconographic diffusion indicates intensive cultural exchange that transmitted not only artistic styles, but also religious concepts, political ideologies, and ceremonial practices across linguistic and ethnic boundaries. The consistency of these elements suggests coordinated cultural transmission rather than random artistic borrowing. Toltec influence on Zapotec civilization is evident at Mitla, where palace complexes constructed during the 11th and 12th centuries incorporate Central Mexican architectural elements within distinctively Zapotec decorative programs. The site's famous geometric stone mosaics, composed of thousands of precisely cut pieces fitted together without mortar, demonstrate technical mastery that rivals contemporary achievements anywhere in the world. These mosaics create complex geometric patterns that may encode astronomical, calendrical, or mythological information, while serving decorative functions that celebrated royal wealth and artistic patronage. The integration of Toltec and Zapotec architectural traditions at Mitla produced palace complexes that combined central Mexican columned hall layouts with local construction techniques and decorative preferences. The result was a distinctive regional synthesis that maintained Zapotec cultural identity while incorporating innovations derived from Toltec political and religious systems. This architectural evidence suggests that Toltec influence was exercised through diplomatic and commercial relationships rather than direct military conquest, enabling local adaptations that preserved regional characteristics within broader cultural frameworks. The architectural synthesis achieved at sites like Mitla represented just one facet of the complex cultural landscape that emerged across Mesoamerica following the decline of Toltec hegemony around 1200 AD. Rather than witnessing a collapse comparable to earlier transitions, the end of Toltec dominance ushered in an era of remarkable regional diversity, where distinct civilizations developed sophisticated political systems, artistic traditions, and economic networks while maintaining connections through trade, warfare, and diplomatic exchange that created a web of interconnected but autonomous cultural zones. In the mountainous highlands of Michoacán, the Purepecha people constructed one of Mesoamerica's most formidable empires, centered on the island capital of Tzintzuntzin in Lake Pátzcuaro. Unlike other Mesoamerican civilizations that developed gradually through agricultural intensification and population growth, the Purepecha Empire emerged rapidly during the 13th century through military conquest and political consolidation that united previously independent communities under centralized royal authority. The empire's rulers, known as the Kazonsi, established administrative systems that controlled approximately 75,000 square kilometers of territory from the Pacific coast to the edges of the Basin of Mexico. The Purepecha capital at Tzintzuntzin occupied a naturally defensible island position that provided strategic advantages while demonstrating the civilization's sophisticated understanding of lacustrine environments and aquatic resource management. The city's ceremonial center featured 5 massive rectangular platforms called yakartas, constructed using a distinctive architectural technique that combined volcanic stone masonry with earth and rubble fill. These platforms, measuring up to 450 meters in length and 180 meters in width, supported temple complexes dedicated to the principal Purepecha deities, while serving as venues for royal ceremonies and administrative activities. The Yakata construction technique represented a significant architectural innovation that differed markedly from the pyramid building traditions characteristic of other Mesoamerican civilizations. Purepecha architects created stepped rectangular platforms with rounded corners and sloping sides that followed the natural contours of the island's terrain, while providing stable foundations for wooden superstructures. The platform's interior construction utilized carefully fitted volcanic stone blocks held together with clay mortar, creating structures that could withstand seismic activity, common in the region's geologically active landscape. Purepecha metallurgical achievements surpassed those of any other Mesoamerican civilization, with craftsmen developing sophisticated techniques for working copper, silver, gold and bronze that enable production of both utilitarian tools and elaborate ceremonial objects. Archaeological evidence indicates that Purepecha smiths mastered complex processes including casting, hammering, annealing, and alloying that required specialized knowledge of metal properties, furnace construction, and temperature control. The empire's copper mines in the Sierra Madre Occidental provided raw materials for tool production that gave Purepecha armies significant advantages over enemies equipped with traditional stone weapons. The empire's military organization emphasized professional warrior classes equipped with copper-headed spears, axes, and clubs that could penetrate traditional cotton armor and wooden shields used by neighbouring peoples. Purepecha metallurgical superiority enabled the production of fishhooks, needles, bells, and ornamental objects that became highly valued trade goods throughout western Mexico. The technical knowledge required for these achievements was closely guarded by craft guilds that controlled production techniques and maintained quality standards essential for the empire's economic prosperity and military dominance. Purepecha resistance to Aztec expansion represented one of the most significant military confrontations of the late post-classic period, with multiple campaigns launched by Aztec rulers failing to achieve conquest of the mountainous empire. The Purepecha advantage derived not only from superior metallurgy, but also from geographical factors that favoured defensive warfare and the empire's ability to mobilise large armies quickly through efficient administrative systems. The rugged terrain of Michoacán channeled Aztec advances along predictable routes, where Purepecha forces could establish defensive positions and utilise their superior weapons effectively. The Battle of Taximaroa around 1480 AD demonstrated Purepecha military capabilities when their forces decisively defeated an Aztec army led by Axayacatl, inflicting casualties that forced the Aztecs to abandon territorial ambitions in western Mexico. Purepecha warriors used copper-tipped spears and axes to devastating effect against Aztec forces equipped with traditional obsidian weapons, while the Empire's knowledge of local terrain enabled tactical maneuvers that maximized their technological advantages. The victory established the Purepecha Empire as the only major Mesoamerican power capable of successfully resisting Aztec military expansion. The empire's administrative system incorporated elements derived from both Mesoamerican political traditions and distinctive innovations that reflected Purepecha cultural values and environmental adaptations. The Kazantzi maintained royal authority through a complex hierarchy of provincial governors, military commanders, and tribute collectors who ensured central control over distant territories while allowing local communities to maintain traditional practices that did not conflict with imperial policies. This administrative flexibility enabled the empire to integrate diverse ethnic groups and ecological zones within unified political structures. Purepecha religious practices centered on the worship of Curacauari, the fire god, whose cult provided ideological foundations for royal authority and military conquest. The deity's association with volcanic activity and metallurgical processes connected religious symbolism with the empire's technological achievements and geographical characteristics. Ceremonial centres featured perpetual fires maintained by specialised priests who conducted rituals involving the sacrifice of captured enemies and the offering of precious metals and other valuable materials obtained through conquest and trade. The empire's economic system integrated lacustrine resource exploitation with highland agriculture and long-distance trade networks that connected Michoacán with regions throughout western Mexico and beyond. Lake Pátzcuaro provided abundant fish, waterfowl, and aquatic plants that supplemented agricultural production while supporting specialized crafts including basketry, mat weaving, and canoe construction. The lake's island and shoreline settlements developed sophisticated aquaculture systems that managed fish populations while maintaining ecological balance essential for long-term sustainability. Purepecha agricultural techniques adapted to the region's mountainous terrain through extensive terracing systems that prevented soil erosion while creating level planting surfaces for maize, beans, squash, and other crops. The empire's farmers developed distinctive cultivation methods that took advantage of volcanic soil fertility and seasonal rainfall patterns while maintaining forest cover essential for fuel, construction materials, and wildlife habitat. These integrated land management practices supported dense populations while preserving environmental resources necessary for continued prosperity. In the southern highlands of Oaxaca, Mixtec civilization achieved remarkable cultural sophistication through political systems that emphasized elite intermarriage, artistic patronage, and the production of codex manuscripts that recorded genealogical, historical, and religious information with unprecedented detail and accuracy. Unlike the centralized empires characteristic of other post-classic civilizations, Mixtec political organization remained fragmented among dozens of small kingdoms and city-states that maintained independence, while participating in complex networks of alliance, rivalry, and cultural exchange. Mixtec codices represent some of ancient America's finest achievements in manuscript production, with books like the Codex Zucha displaying sophisticated artistic techniques, complex narrative structures, and detailed historical information that illuminates post-classic political dynamics and cultural practices. These manuscripts were painted on deerskin, prepared with lime coating that provided smooth surfaces for detailed artwork executed using brushes made from animal hair and pigments derived from mineral and organic sources. The codice's production required specialized knowledge of material preparation, artistic techniques, and iconographic systems that were transmitted through scribal schools attached to royal courts. The Codex Zuch chronicles the life and conquests of 8-Deer Jaguar Claw, one of the most successful Mixtec rulers of the 11th century, whose military campaigns and political alliances enabled him to control territories extending across much of Oaxaca. The manuscript's narrative structure combines historical events with mythological elements in ways that legitimized royal authority, while preserving cultural memory of important political developments. Individual pages display complex compositions featuring multiple figures, architectural elements, and symbolic devices that require sophisticated understanding of Mixtec iconographic conventions and historical contexts. Mixtec goldworking achieved technical and artistic standards that rivaled contemporary achievements anywhere in the world, with craftsmen developing sophisticated techniques for casting, hammering, filigree work, and stone inlay that enabled production of elaborate ornamental objects. The famous gold treasures from Monte Alban's Tomb 7, though created during the post-classic reoccupation of the ancient Zapotec center, demonstrate Mixtec mastery of metallurgical processes and artistic design that combined technical virtuosity with symbolic complexity. These objects include pectorals, ear ornaments, rings, and ceremonial implements decorated with turquoise, jade, and other precious stones arranged in intricate patterns. The technical requirements for Mixtec goldworking included knowledge of metal properties, alloy composition, casting techniques, and decorative processes that required years of specialized training and access to rare materials obtained through long-distance trade networks. Gold sources in the Sierra Madre del Sur provided raw materials for craft production, while turquoise from northern Mexico and jade from Guatemala were incorporated into finished objects that demonstrated the extensive commercial connections maintained by Mixtec artisans and their royal patrons. Mixtec political organization emphasized strategic marriage alliances that created kinship networks, connecting ruling families across different kingdoms and regions. These matrimonial connections served multiple functions, including conflict resolution, territorial negotiation, tribute arrangement, and cultural transmission that maintained political stability while enabling individual kingdoms to preserve autonomy. Royal genealogies recorded in codex manuscripts document these complex kinship relationships and their political implications across multiple generations. The marriage alliance system enabled Mixtec kingdoms to coordinate military campaigns, share resources during crises, and maintain cultural unity despite political fragmentation. Intermarriage between royal families created obligations for mutual assistance that could be activated during conflicts with external enemies or internal succession disputes. These relationships also facilitated the circulation of luxury goods, artistic styles, and religious practices that maintained cultural coherence across the Mixtec region, while enabling local variations in political organization and ceremonial practice. Mixtec architectural achievements are exemplified by the palace complexes at Mitla, where geometric stone mosaics created decorative programs of extraordinary sophistication and technical precision. These mosaics, composed of thousands of individually carved pieces fitted together without mortar, demonstrate mathematical knowledge and artistic planning that required careful coordination between architects, stone carvers, and construction supervisors. The patterns created by these mosaics may encode astronomical, calendrical, or genealogical information, while serving aesthetic functions that celebrated royal wealth and artistic patronage. The palace complexes at Mitla feature distinctive architectural layouts that combine central Mexican columned halls with local decorative traditions and construction techniques. The building's interior spaces could accommodate large assemblies while providing private residential areas for royal families and their retainers. Elaborate drainage systems prevented water damage while creating architectural features that enhanced the complex's visual appeal and functional efficiency. In the Maya regions of the Yucatan Peninsula, post-classic civilization developed distinctive characteristics that combined classic period traditions with innovations reflecting changed political circumstances and cultural influences from central Mexico. Following the collapse of southern lowland centers during the 9th and 10th centuries, Maya civilization experienced demographic and political reorganization that concentrated populations in northern Yucatan while maintaining cultural practices and intellectual traditions that preserved essential elements of classic period achievements. Mayapan emerged as the dominant Maya center during the 13th and 14th centuries, establishing political control over much of northern Yucatan through military conquest and tribute collection that created the region's most extensive territorial empire since classic period Calakmul. The city's rulers, known as the Kokum dynasty, maintained authority through administrative systems that combined Maya political traditions with organizational innovations derived from central Mexican sources. Archaeological evidence indicates that Mayapan housed approximately 15,000 inhabitants within defensive walls that enclosed residential areas, ceremonial precincts, and craft production zones. The city's ceremonial center featured a scaled-down replica of Chichen Itza's Temple of Kukulkan, demonstrating cultural continuity with earlier post-classic achievements while asserting Mayapan's political legitimacy as successor to the previous regional capital. The pyramid's construction incorporated architectural elements and proportional relationships derived from the earlier structure, while adapting to local construction materials and labor availability. This architectural quotation illustrates the importance of historical precedent in Maya political ideology and the role of monumental construction in legitimizing royal authority. Mayapan's political organization incorporated tribute collection systems that required subject communities to provide agricultural products, craft goods, and labor services to the central administration. Archaeological evidence indicates that the city received cotton textiles, cacao beans, salt, obsidian tools, and other valuable commodities from throughout the Maya region. These tribute flows supported the urban population, while enabling the ruling elite to patronize craft production, architectural construction, and religious ceremonies that maintained political authority and cultural identity. The city's residential areas reveal evidence of craft specialization and social stratification that characterized post-classic Maya urban organization. Elite residences near the ceremonial center featured stone masonry construction, interior courtyards, and elaborate architectural decoration that demonstrated high social status and economic prosperity. Commoner households occupied less elaborate structures, but still participated in specialized production activities including textile weaving, ceramic manufacture, and food processing that contributed to the city's economic prosperity. Coastal Maya centers, including Tulum, Santa Rita Corozal, and Lamanai, developed distinctive cultural syntheses that combine traditional Maya practices with innovations reflecting intensive participation in maritime trade networks, connecting the Yucatan Peninsula with regions throughout the Caribbean and Central America. These coastal settlements exploited marine resources while serving as ports for canoe-based commerce that transported bulk commodities including salt, cotton, textiles, cacao, and obsidian tools across vast oceanic distances. Tulum's dramatic clifftop location overlooking the Caribbean Sea provided both defensive advantages and symbolic significance as a gateway between terrestrial and aquatic realms that held religious importance in Maya cosmology. The site's Castillo Pyramid served as a landmark for maritime navigation, while housing religious shrines dedicated to deities associated with trade, travel, and marine resources. The structure's architectural design incorporated practical features including beacon installations that guided approaching vessels while maintaining ceremonial functions that sanctified commercial activities. The site's murals display artistic traditions that combine classic Maya iconographic elements with influences from central Mexico and other regions connected through maritime trade networks. These paintings depict supernatural beings, astronomical symbols, and ritual scenes that illustrate the religious beliefs and ceremonial practices that legitimized merchant activities while providing spiritual protection for dangerous sea voyages. The mural's technical execution demonstrates continued artistic sophistication, despite the political fragmentation that characterized the post-classic period. Maya maritime trade networks connected coastal centers with inland communities through river systems that penetrated deep into the Petén rainforest and highland regions of Guatemala and Chiapas. Large cargo canoes capable of carrying several tons of merchandise enabled bulk transport of commodities that would have been prohibitively expensive to move overland. These vessels, constructed from single tree trunks and equipped with sails woven from cotton textiles, could navigate both marine and riverine environments while providing mobile platforms for long-distance commercial expeditions. The economic foundation of coastal Maya prosperity rested on salt production facilities that exploited the region's extensive lagoons and tidal flats through sophisticated evaporation systems. Archaeological evidence indicates that Maya salt producers constructed networks of channels, ponds, and collection areas that concentrated seawater through solar evaporation while maintaining quality control essential for long-distance trade. Salt production required detailed knowledge of tidal cycles, seasonal weather patterns, and processing techniques that were transmitted through specialized craft communities. In the basin of Mexico, the political landscape following Toltec decline became increasingly complex, as multiple city-states competed for territorial control, tribute collection, and commercial dominance over the region's agricultural and lacustrine resources. The Aztec people, recent immigrants from northern Mexico, initially occupied marginal positions within this competitive environment, but gradually developed military capabilities and political alliances that enabled territorial expansion and the eventual establishment of imperial hegemony over much of central Mexico. The Aztecs' origins remain partially obscured by mythological accounts that combine historical memories with religious symbolism, but archaeological evidence indicates that they arrived in the basin of Mexico during the 13th century as one of several Chichimeque groups migrating southward from arid regions of northern Mexico. These immigrants brought distinctive cultural practices including specialized military techniques, religious observances, and social organization that differed from established central Mexican traditions, while incorporating elements derived from earlier Mesoamerican civilizations. Tenochtitlan's founding around 1325 AD on an island in Lake Texcoco represented a strategic adaptation to the basin of Mexico's lacustrine environment, while providing defensive advantages that enabled the Aztecs to maintain independence during their early expansion period. The city's location required sophisticated hydraulic engineering to create habitable land through Chinampa's construction, drainage systems, and freshwater supply networks that supported growing populations while enabling agricultural intensification. These technological achievements demonstrated Aztec engineering capabilities while creating economic foundations for subsequent territorial expansion. The city's ceremonial center developed according to cosmological principles that connected urban planning with religious symbolism and astronomical observations fundamental to Aztec political ideology. The Templo Mayor, dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc, served as the focal point for royal ceremonies and religious observances that legitimized Aztec authority, while providing venues for tribute presentation, diplomatic reception, and military celebration. The temple's architectural design incorporated symbolic elements that represented the cosmic mountain where gods resided and the axis connecting earthly and supernatural realms. Aztec military organization emphasized warrior societies that recruited members from throughout central Mexico, while maintaining ethnic diversity within unified command structures. The Eagle and Jaguar warrior orders, inherited from Toltec precedents, provided social advancement opportunities for commoners while creating military elites whose loyalty to imperial institutions transcended local ethnic identities. These warrior brotherhoods combined military training with religious initiation and ideological education that created shared cultural values and political commitments essential for imperial expansion and territorial control. The gradual consolidation of Aztec power involved complex processes of alliance formation, military conquest, and diplomatic negotiation that enabled territorial expansion while maintaining political relationships with autonomous city-states throughout central Mexico. The Triple Alliance, formalized around 1428 AD between Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan, created administrative frameworks for tribute collection, military coordination, and territorial governance that would enable the subsequent expansion of Aztec imperial control throughout much of Mesoamerica. The Triple Alliance formalized in 1428 AD between Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan marked the beginning of the most extensive imperial expansion in Mesoamerican history, transforming the Aztecs from a marginal island community into the dominant force controlling territories from the Pacific to the Atlantic coasts. This political confederation emerged from the successful rebellion against Azcapotzalco, the Tepanec city-state that had previously dominated the basin of Mexico through tribute extraction and military intimidation. Under the leadership of its Coatl of Tenochtitlan and his nephew Tlacaelel, the Allied forces decisively defeated the Tepanec Empire around 1428 AD, redistributing territorial control and establishing new frameworks for imperial administration that would govern central Mexico for nearly a century. The alliance's structure reflected pragmatic political calculations rather than equal partnership, with Tenochtitlan assuming dominant authority over military campaigns and tribute collection, while Texcoco provided administrative expertise and judicial oversight, and Tlacopan served as a junior partner responsible for specific territorial sectors. This division of responsibilities enabled efficient governance across diverse ecological zones and ethnic territories while maintaining the fiction of collaborative rule that legitimized imperial expansion beyond the basin of Mexico. Archaeological evidence from tribute lists and administrative documents indicates that Tenochtitlan received approximately 60% of collected revenues, Texcoco claimed 30%, and Tlacopan retained the remaining 10%, proportions that reflected actual political influence within the Confederation. Aztec military expansion proceeded systematically through a combination of diplomatic pressure, economic incentives, and armed conquest that incorporated existing political structures rather than destroying them entirely. Local rulers who submitted voluntarily retained authority over internal affairs while accepting tributary obligations and military cooperation requirements that integrated their territories into imperial administrative networks. Communities that resisted faced devastating military campaigns, followed by the installation of Aztec governors, tribute collectors, and garrison forces that ensured compliance with imperial policies while suppressing potential rebellions. The conquest of the Huastec region around 1450 AD demonstrated Aztec military capabilities and strategic planning on an unprecedented scale. Moctezuma Iluikamina coordinated a multi-pronged campaign that involved approximately 200,000 warriors drawn from throughout the Triple Alliance territories, supported by extensive supply networks that transported food, weapons and equipment across hundreds of kilometers of difficult terrain. The Huastec cities of Tamuin and Tamuhi fell after prolonged sieges that showcased Aztec innovations in siege warfare, including the construction of temporary causeways across swampy terrain and the deployment of specialized units trained in urban combat techniques. Huastec resistance centered on fortified hilltop positions that exploited natural defensive advantages while utilizing superior knowledge of local terrain to conduct guerrilla operations against Aztec supply lines. The defenders employed poisoned arrows, concealed pit traps, and coordinated ambush tactics that inflicted significant casualties on Imperial forces before superior Aztec numbers and logistical capabilities overwhelmed organized resistance. The conquest's aftermath involved the systematic destruction of Huastec religious centers, the execution of captured nobles, and the imposition of tribute obligations that transferred substantial wealth to Tenochtitlan while demonstrating imperial power to potential enemies throughout Mesoamerica. The expansion into Oaxaca required different tactical approaches due to Zapotec and Mixtec political fragmentation and the mountainous terrain that favored defensive warfare. Rather than attempting comprehensive territorial conquest, Aztec forces established strategic garrisons at key locations, including Huacyacac that controlled trade routes and tribute collection, while leaving local rulers in nominal control of their territories. This indirect governance system enabled efficient resource extraction while minimizing administrative costs and military commitments that might have overstretched imperial capabilities. Tenochtitlan's urban development during the 15th and early 16th centuries represented the culmination of Mesoamerican architectural and engineering achievement, transforming the island city into a metropolis housing between 200,000 and 300,000 inhabitants within a carefully planned urban grid that maximized available space while providing sophisticated infrastructure for water management, waste disposal, and transportation. The city's expansion required continuous land reclamation through Chinampas construction that extended the original island's boundaries while creating agricultural zones capable of feeding the growing population through intensive cultivation techniques. The Chinampa system represented one of history's most productive agricultural innovations, enabling farmers to achieve crop yields that supported urban population densities comparable to modern cities while maintaining ecological sustainability through integrated aquaculture and waste recycling practices. These artificial islands, constructed from alternating layers of lake sediment, organic waste and vegetation, created raised planting surfaces surrounded by drainage canals that provided irrigation water, transportation access, and habitat for fish and waterfowl that supplemented agricultural production. Individual Chinampas plots measured approximately 30 meters long by 2.5 meters wide, with willow trees planted along the edges to prevent erosion while providing construction materials and fuel for household use. Chinampas construction required sophisticated understanding of hydrology, soil chemistry, and plant ecology that was transmitted through family-based agricultural traditions spanning multiple generations. Farmers maintained soil fertility through careful composting of organic waste, including human excrement collected from urban households, which provided nitrogen and phosphorus essential for intensive cultivation. The system's productivity enabled multiple harvests per year while supporting crop rotations that included maize, beans, squash, tomatoes, chili peppers, and flowers used for religious ceremonies and market trade. The city's water management infrastructure represented an engineering achievement comparable to contemporary European urban systems, with dual aqueduct networks that transported fresh water from mainland springs while preventing contamination from the brackish lake environment surrounding Tenochtitlan. The Chapultepec Aqueduct, constructed during Moctezuma Ilhuicamina's reign, featured stone-lined channels supported by arched foundations that carried water across several kilometers of lake surface through carefully graded conduits that maintained consistent flow rates. A parallel aqueduct from Coyoacan provided backup capacity while enabling system maintenance without interrupting water supplies to the urban population. Street-level distribution networks channeled fresh water to neighborhood fountains, elite residences, and public buildings through terracotta pipes and stone-lined channels that prevented leakage while maintaining water quality through regular cleaning and maintenance procedures. The system's design incorporated overflow mechanisms that prevented flooding during heavy rains, while ensuring adequate pressure for distribution to elevated areas of the city. Specialized water carriers transported supplies to individual households using ceramic vessels, creating employment opportunities while ensuring universal access to clean water, regardless of social status or residential location. The Templo Mayor complex dominated Tenochtitlan's ceremonial center, its twin pyramids rising approximately 60 meters above the Great Plaza to create a monumental focal point visible from throughout the Basin of Mexico. The temple's architectural design incorporated symbolic elements representing fundamental Aztec cosmological concepts, with the northern pyramid dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god essential for agricultural fertility, and the southern pyramid honouring Huitzilopochtli, the patron deity of warfare and imperial expansion. The structure's orientation aligned with astronomical phenomena, including the spring equinox, when the sun rose directly between the two temple summits, connecting architectural design with calendrical calculations fundamental to Aztec religious practice. Archaeological excavations conducted between 1978 and 1982 revealed 7 distinct construction phases spanning the temple's development, from a modest shrine built around 1325 AD to the massive complex encountered by Spanish conquistadors in 1519. Each construction phase incorporated earlier structures within expanded foundations, while adding new architectural elements and decorative programs that reflected the growing wealth and territorial extent of the Aztec Empire. The final construction phase, completed during Ahuitzottl's reign around 1487 AD, featured elaborate stone sculptures, painted murals, and precious metal ornaments that demonstrated the empire's artistic achievements and access to luxury materials obtained through conquest and trade. The temple's dedication ceremonies involved unprecedented scales of human sacrifice that shocked even contemporary Mesoamerican observers accustomed to ritual violence. The 1487 dedication allegedly involved the sacrifice of thousands of captives over a 4-day period, with victims' hearts offered to the temple's deities while their bodies were thrown down the pyramid steps to demonstrate divine favour and imperial power. Archaeological evidence supports the occurrence of mass sacrificial events, with bone deposits indicating that hundreds of individuals were killed during single ceremonies, though the exact numbers recorded in later sources may represent exaggerated propaganda rather than accurate historical documentation. Aztec social organization reflected the empire's military origins and territorial expansion through hierarchical systems that combined hereditary nobility with meritocratic advancement opportunities based on military achievement and administrative competence. The emperor, known as the Huey Tlatoani, or Great Speaker, occupied the apex of political authority, while claiming divine sanction through descent from gods and communication with supernatural forces essential for maintaining cosmic order. Royal succession typically followed patrilineal principles. with brothers or sons of deceased rulers selected by councils of nobles based on demonstrated military prowess, administrative ability, and religious knowledge. The Pippleton nobility consisted of hereditary lords who controlled agricultural estates, tribute collection rights, and administrative positions throughout the empire's territories. These nobles maintained their elevated status through military service, religious patronage, and marriage alliances that connected local elite families with imperial power structures. Noble education emphasized military training, religious instruction, and administrative skills necessary for territorial governance, while sumptuary laws restricted access to luxury goods, including elaborate feathered costumes, jade ornaments, and precious metal jewelry that visually demonstrated social hierarchies. The Pochteca merchant class occupied a unique position within Aztec society, combining commercial activities with diplomatic and intelligence functions that supported imperial expansion while accumulating wealth that rivaled noble fortunes. These professional traders organized into hereditary guilds that controlled long-distance commerce throughout Mesoamerica, maintaining trading posts and warehouses from Guatemala to northern Mexico, while gathering political and military intelligence that informed imperial policy decisions. Pochteca expeditions involved hundreds of participants carrying trade goods worth thousands of cacao beans across dangerous territories where they faced robbery, warfare, and political persecution from hostile communities. Individual Pochteca merchants specialized in particular trade routes and commodity types, developing expertise in market conditions, transportation logistics, and diplomatic protocols necessary for successful commercial operations. Luxury goods including tropical bird feathers, precious stones, cacao beans, cotton textiles, and exotic animal products formed the core of long-distance trade, while bulk commodities like salt, obsidian tools, and ceramic vessels supplied regional markets within the empire's territories. The merchants' wealth enabled them to purchase agricultural estates, sponsor religious ceremonies, and educate their children in elite schools, creating social mobility that challenged traditional noble prerogatives. Pochteca trading expeditions served imperial interests by establishing diplomatic contacts, gathering intelligence about potential conquest targets, and creating economic dependencies that facilitated subsequent military campaigns. Merchants often preceded military forces into new territories, establishing commercial relationships and identifying political divisions that could be exploited during conquest operations. Their reports provided detailed information about enemy military capabilities, resource availability, and potential allies that enabled Aztec commanders to plan effective campaigns while minimizing risks and casualties. The Calpulli system provided organizational frameworks for urban neighborhoods and rural communities throughout the empire, combining residential, occupational, and religious functions within corporate groups that maintained collective identity and mutual obligations across generations. Each Calpulli controlled specific territories within cities or agricultural zones, with membership determined by birth, marriage, or adoption into families that traced descent from common ancestors. These corporate groups maintained temples dedicated to patron deities, schools for children's education, and administrative structures that coordinated taxation, military service, and public works projects. Individual Calpulli specialized in particular occupations, including craft production, agricultural cultivation, or military service, creating economic interdependencies that supported urban life while maintaining social cohesion through shared cultural practices and religious observances. Craft-producing Calpulli developed sophisticated techniques for manufacturing textiles, ceramics, obsidian tools, and luxury goods that supplied both local markets and long-distance trade networks. Agricultural Calpulli managed Chinampas plots, terraced fields, and irrigation systems that fed urban populations, while generating surplus production for tribute payments and market exchange. Religious practices permeated every aspect of Aztec life through ceremonial calendars, that coordinated agricultural activities, military campaigns, and social obligations with astronomical cycles and mythological narratives that connected human communities with cosmic order. The Tonalpohualli, a 260-day ritual calendar, combined with the Xiuhpohualli solar calendar to create 52-year cycles that determined individual destinies, ceremonial timing, and political decisions throughout the empire. Professional priests maintained detailed knowledge of calendrical calculations, astronomical observations, and ritual procedures necessary for conducting ceremonies that ensured divine favor and community prosperity. Human sacrifice formed the central element of Aztec religious practice, with various forms of ritual killing performed to nourish gods, maintain cosmic balance, and demonstrate imperial power to subject populations and potential enemies. Daily sacrificial offerings at the Templo Maya typically involved small numbers of victims whose hearts were extracted using obsidian knives before being offered to deity statues, while major festivals required hundreds or thousands of sacrifices performed according to specific ritual protocols. The new fire ceremony, conducted every 52 years at the completion of calendar cycles, involved the extinguishing of all fires throughout the empire, followed by the rekindling of sacred flames that were distributed to communities as symbols of cosmic renewal. The complexity of sacrificial rituals required specialized priestly knowledge of mythological narratives, calendrical calculations, and ceremonial procedures that connected specific forms of killing with particular deities and cosmic functions. Warriors captured in battle provided the most prestigious sacrificial victims, with their deaths reenacting mythological conflicts between gods while transferring their spiritual power to Aztec deities. The ritual consumption of sacrificial victims' flesh by priests and nobles symbolically incorporated enemies' strength into Aztec society, while demonstrating the empire's ability to transform opposition into sources of power and sustenance. Tribute collection systems created economic networks that channeled wealth from throughout Mesoamerica to Tenochtitlan, while supporting imperial administration, military operations, and elite consumption that demonstrated Aztec power and cultural sophistication. The Codex Mendoza and other tribute lists document the systematic extraction of resources, including agricultural products, craft goods, raw materials, and human labor from over 400 subject communities distributed across diverse ecological zones, from tropical lowlands to high mountain valleys. Annual tribute obligations were calculated based on communities' productive capacity and strategic importance, with adjustments made for local conditions and political circumstances that affected payment abilities. Agricultural tribute included maize, beans, chili peppers, cacao beans, and cotton that supplied urban populations, while providing raw materials for craft production and long-distance trade. Craft goods including textiles, ceramic vessels, obsidian tools, and feathered ornaments demonstrated subject communities' technical skills, while supplying luxury items for elite consumption and diplomatic gifts. Raw materials including jade, turquoise, gold, and exotic feathers enabled specialized craftsmen in Tenochtitlan to produce elaborate ceremonial objects and royal regalia that visually reinforce social hierarchies and imperial authority. The tribute system's efficiency depended on administrative networks that coordinated collection, transportation, and storage of diverse commodities across vast distances and difficult terrain. Tribute collectors appointed by the imperial government maintained detailed records of obligations, payments, and arrears while supervising local officials responsible for gathering and preparing shipments. Specialized porters carried tribute goods along established routes that connected subject territories with regional centers and ultimately with Tenochtitlan, where massive storage facilities housed accumulated wealth until it was redistributed according to imperial priorities and social obligations. The sophisticated tribute networks that sustained Aztec imperial power created both the wealth that attracted Spanish attention and the internal tensions that would facilitate European conquest. When Hernan Cortés landed on the Veracruz coast in February 1519 with approximately 500 men, 16 horses and several cannon, he encountered a political landscape fractured by imperial overextension, tributary resentment, and recent military setbacks that had weakened Aztec authority throughout eastern Mexico. The timing proved crucial, as Moctezuma Xocoyotzin faced mounting challenges from rebellious provinces, succession disputes, and religious uncertainties that paralysed effective response to the unprecedented threat posed by European technology, diseases, and military tactics. The Spanish expedition represented the culmination of Caribbean colonial expansion that had systematically destroyed indigenous societies throughout the Greater Antilles, while providing European colonists with experience in conquest techniques, native labour exploitation, and territorial administration. Cortés himself had participated in the conquest of Cuba under Diego Velázquez, gaining first-hand knowledge of indigenous military capabilities, political vulnerabilities, and the devastating impact of epidemic diseases on populations lacking immunity to European pathogens. His decision to establish an independent municipality at Villarrica de la Veracruz and reject Velázquez's authority demonstrated the political opportunism that characterized Spanish colonial ventures throughout the Americas. The expedition's composition reflected the diverse social origins and motivations that drove Spanish expansion into the Americas. Hidalgos seeking to restore family fortunes, diminished by economic changes in Spain, served alongside artisans, soldiers, and adventurers drawn by prospects of wealth and social advancement unavailable in Europe's rigid class system. Several participants, including Bernal Díaz del Castillo, left detailed accounts that provide invaluable documentation of conquest events while revealing Spanish perceptions of indigenous societies and the cultural misunderstandings that shaped colonial relationships. Cortés's initial encounters with Maya communities along the Yucatan coast provided crucial intelligence about Mesoamerican political organization, military capabilities, and internal divisions that could be exploited during subsequent operations. The acquisition of Malintzin, Nahuatl-speaking woman given to the Spanish as tribute, proved decisive in enabling communication with indigenous groups and understanding complex political relationships that govern territorial control and alliance formation. Her linguistic skills and cultural knowledge transformed Spanish tactical capabilities while providing access to information networks that revealed Aztec vulnerabilities and potential allies among disaffected tributary communities. The march inland toward Tenochtitlan required navigating through territories controlled by various indigenous groups, whose responses to Spanish presence ranged from cautious cooperation to active resistance. The Tlaxcalans initially launched fierce attacks against the Spanish force, employing traditional Mesoamerican warfare tactics, including coordinated infantry assaults, projectile bombardment, and attempts to capture enemies for sacrificial purposes. However, Spanish military technology, particularly steel weapons, armour, firearms and cavalry, provided overwhelming advantages in open-field combat that it enabled a small European force to defeat indigenous armies numbering in the thousands. The decisive battle at Otumba demonstrated both Spanish military superiority and indigenous tactical limitations when confronting unfamiliar weapons and fighting techniques. Tlaxcalan forces arranged in traditional formations found themselves vulnerable to cavalry charges that scattered infantry units, while Spanish crossbows and arquebuses inflicted casualties at ranges beyond indigenous projectile weapon effectiveness. The psychological impact of horses, previously unknown in the Americas, created panic among indigenous warriors who initially believed the mounted Spanish were single supernatural beings combining human and animal characteristics. Following their military defeat, Tlaxcalan leaders made the strategic decision to ally with Spanish forces against their traditional Aztec enemies, providing thousands of warriors logistical support and detailed intelligence about Tenochtitlan's defences and political vulnerabilities. This alliance proved crucial to Spanish success, as indigenous allies provided the numerical strength necessary for siege operations, while their knowledge of local terrain, supply routes, and political relationships enabled effective coordination of military campaigns across unfamiliar territories. The Spanish arrival at Tenochtitlan in November 1519 created unprecedented diplomatic challenges for Moctezuma, whose advisors remained divided about appropriate responses to visitors who possessed supernatural characteristics while displaying obvious military capabilities and territorial ambitions. Religious prophecies concerning Quetzalcoatl's return complicated political calculations, as some interpretations suggested that Cortés might represent the returning deity whose authority superseded earthly rulers. Archaeological evidence indicates that Moctezuma had been constructing new temples and conducting elaborate ceremonies intended to address supernatural threats, suggesting genuine religious concerns about cosmic disruption and divine displeasure. The emperor's decision to receive the Spanish as honoured guests while maintaining military readiness reflected sophisticated diplomatic strategies designed to assess European intentions while preserving options for peaceful resolution or military action. The accommodation of Spanish forces within the palace complex of Azayacatl provided opportunities for close observation of European capabilities, while demonstrating Aztec wealth and power through architectural grandeur, artistic achievements, and ceremonial displays that impressed even Spanish observers accustomed to European royal courts. Moctezuma's captivity, accomplished through Spanish treachery during a diplomatic meeting in November 1519, represented a calculated gamble that Aztec political systems could be controlled through manipulation of royal authority. Cortés correctly understood that Mesoamerican political legitimacy depended on divine kingship concepts that required physical presence and ceremonial performance to maintain effectiveness. By controlling the emperor's person while forcing him to continue governing through Spanish direction, the conquistadors attempted to preserve existing administrative systems while redirecting their benefits toward European interests. The strategy's initial success demonstrated Spanish understanding of indigenous political psychology and the effectiveness of European military technology in maintaining control over hostile populations. Moctezuma continued to receive tribute, conduct religious ceremonies, and issue governmental decrees while under Spanish supervision, creating the illusion of continuity that prevented immediate rebellion while enabling systematic exploitation of imperial resources. However, this arrangement proved inherently unstable as Spanish demands for gold, territorial concessions, and religious conversion increasingly conflicted with Aztec political traditions and popular expectations of royal behaviour. The Tenochtitlan massacre of May 1520, perpetrated by Pedro de Alvarado during Cortés's absence in Veracruz, shattered any possibility of peaceful Spanish-Aztec coexistence, while demonstrating European cultural incomprehension and military ruthlessness that characterized colonial relationships throughout the Americas. Alvarado's forces attacked unarmed participants in a religious ceremony dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, killing hundreds of nobles, priests and commoners gathered in the Templo Mayor precinct for ritual observances that posed no military threat to Spanish security. The massacre's timing during sacred ceremonies added religious sacrilege to political betrayal, transforming Spanish presence from unwelcome occupation into existential threat requiring total resistance. The uprising that followed the Tenochtitlan massacre revealed the depth of indigenous hostility that had been building during months of Spanish occupation, tribute extraction, and religious persecution. Aztec forces, coordinated by military leaders who had been planning resistance operations, launched coordinated attacks against Spanish positions throughout Tenochtitlan, while cutting off supply lines and communication with indigenous allies. The siege of the Spanish garrison in Azayacattl's palace demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning and logistical coordination that nearly succeeded in eliminating European presence before reinforcements could arrive from the coast. Moctezuma's death during the uprising remains historically controversial, with Spanish sources claiming he was killed by stones thrown by his own people when he attempted to restore order, while indigenous accounts suggest Spanish execution when his usefulness as a puppet ruler ended. Archaeological evidence cannot resolve these conflicting narratives, but the emperor's death eliminated any possibility of legitimate political compromise while creating succession crises that further weakened Aztec resistance to European conquest. The selection of Cuitlahuac as new emperor provided experienced military leadership, but occurred too late to prevent the political fragmentation that facilitated Spanish tactical advantages. La Noche Triste of June 30th, 1520, witnessed the Spanish evacuation from Tenochtitlan under conditions that nearly resulted in complete European defeat and the preservation of Aztec independence. Spanish forces, burdened with looted gold and hampered by wounded personnel, attempted to escape across Lake Texcoco, using portable bridges while under constant attack from Aztec warriors employing war canoes, projectile weapons, and coordinated infantry assaults. The retreat's high casualties, including the loss of most Spanish horses and artillery, demonstrated indigenous military capabilities when fighting under favourable conditions while revealing European vulnerabilities in unfamiliar environments. The escape's success depended on Tlaxcalan allies, who provided protection during the retreat while maintaining loyalty despite Spanish military setbacks and uncertain prospects for ultimate victory. This continued alliance reflected Tlaxcalan's strategic calculations that Spanish success, however unlikely, offered better prospects for independence from Aztec domination than accommodation with traditional enemies. The relationship also demonstrated indigenous political sophistication and the ability to maintain long-term strategic perspectives despite short-term tactical disadvantages. Cuitlahuac's brief reign witnessed the first devastating smallpox epidemic that killed thousands of indigenous people, while leaving Spanish forces largely unaffected due to childhood exposure and acquired immunity. The disease's impact transcended immediate mortality to create social disruption, economic collapse, and political paralysis that undermined organised resistance more effectively than military campaigns. Archaeological evidence from Tenochtitlan reveals mass burial sites from this period, with skeletal remains showing characteristic smallpox lesions and demographic patterns indicating mortality rates exceeding 40% in some neighbourhoods. The epidemic's psychological impact proved equally devastating as indigenous medical knowledge proved ineffective against unfamiliar pathogens, while Spanish survival suggested supernatural protection or divine favour for European cause. Traditional healing practices, religious ceremonies, and political institutions designed to address familiar challenges proved inadequate for managing unprecedented demographic catastrophe and social breakdown. The diseases spread throughout the basin of Mexico and beyond, created regional disruption that facilitated Spanish military operations while preventing coordinated indigenous resistance. Cuauhtémoc's accession as the final Aztec emperor around December 1520 represented indigenous determination to continue resistance, despite overwhelming challenges posed by disease, military defeat, and political fragmentation. The young ruler, nephew of Moctezuma and son-in-law of Cuitlahuac, possessed military experience and popular support necessary for organising continued resistance while lacking the resources and time required for effective strategic planning. His reign coincided with Spanish preparations for systematic siege operations that would exploit European tactical advantages while minimising risks associated with urban combat in unfamiliar environments. The Siege of Tenochtitlan, beginning in May 1521, represented the largest military operation in the Americas to that date, involving approximately 900 Spanish soldiers supported by over 100,000 indigenous allies drawn from throughout central Mexico. Cortez's strategy combined European siege techniques with indigenous military capabilities and local knowledge to create overwhelming force concentrations while preventing Aztec resupply or reinforcement from mainland territories. The construction of 13 brigantines for naval operations on Lake Texcoco provided crucial tactical advantages by enabling Spanish forces to control water transportation and attack the city from multiple directions simultaneously. The brigantines, constructed using Spanish shipbuilding techniques with indigenous labour and local materials, represented technological synthesis that characterized successful colonial operations throughout the Americas. These shallow draft vessels carried cannon, crossbowmen, and indigenous warriors while providing platforms for coordinated, amphibious assaults against Aztec defensive positions. Their mobility enabled rapid redeployment between attack sectors, while their firepower created psychological effects that demoralized indigenous defenders unaccustomed to naval bombardment. Indigenous allies provided essential numerical strength, logistical support and tactical knowledge that enabled Spanish success, while pursuing their own political objectives of liberation from Aztec dominance. Tlaxcalan forces contributed approximately 50,000 warriors, while Texcocan, Chalcan, and other regional groups provided additional military support coordinated through traditional alliance systems adapted to European command structures. These allies maintained their own military organizations, leadership hierarchies, and tactical preferences while accepting Spanish coordination and technological support that enhanced their effectiveness against common enemies. The siege's duration, extending from May through August 1521, reflected both Aztec defensive capabilities and the logistical challenges of maintaining large military forces in hostile territory. Spanish forces faced constant attacks from Aztec warriors employing urban combat techniques, including rooftop positions, concealed barriers, and coordinated counterattacks that inflicted significant casualties while slowing European advances. The city's canal system provided defensive advantages that channeled Spanish attacks along predictable routes while enabling rapid redeployment of Aztec forces between threatened sectors. Systematic destruction of Tenochtitlan's infrastructure formed a central element of Spanish siege strategy, with European forces demolishing buildings, filling canals, and destroying chinampas to eliminate defensive positions, while demonstrating their determination to achieve complete victory, regardless of cultural or economic costs. This destruction reflected European military doctrine that emphasized total defeat of enemy capabilities rather than preservation of valuable resources or infrastructure that might support future resistance. The policy's implementation required enormous labor investments, while creating permanent changes to the basin of Mexico's landscape and economic systems. The final assault on Tlatelolco Market District in August 1521 witnessed desperate Aztec resistance as defending forces, weakened by months of siege, disease, and starvation, attempted to prevent complete Spanish victory through sacrificial determination and religious conviction. Archaeological excavations in the market area have revealed evidence of the final battles, including Spanish weapons, indigenous defensive works, and mass burial sites that document the conquest's human costs. Skeletal remains show evidence of malnutrition, disease, and violent trauma that illustrate the siege's devastating impact on civilian populations trapped within the city. Cuauhtémoc's capture on August 13, 1521, marked the formal end of Aztec political independence and the beginning of Spanish colonial administration throughout central Mexico. The emperor's torture, intended to reveal hidden treasure locations, demonstrated European priorities that emphasized immediate wealth extraction over political stability or indigenous welfare. His eventual execution in 1525 eliminated the last legitimate focus for indigenous resistance, while providing clear evidence of Spanish intentions regarding traditional political authorities and cultural institutions. The conquest's immediate aftermath witnessed systematic Spanish efforts to locate and confiscate indigenous wealth, while establishing administrative structures for territorial control and resource extraction. The search for Aztec treasure involved extensive excavations, torture of indigenous informants, and destruction of religious sites where valuable objects might be concealed. Spanish estimates of recovered gold and silver, while substantial, fell far short of European expectations based on initial observations of indigenous wealth and artistic achievements, leading to continued pressure for tribute extraction and forced labour that characterised early colonial relationships. Spanish destruction of indigenous codices represented one of history's most devastating episodes of cultural annihilation, eliminating thousands of manuscripts containing historical, religious, scientific and literary information accumulated over centuries of Mesoamerican intellectual development. Diego de Landa's burning of Maya codices in Yucatan and similar destruction throughout central Mexico reflected European determination to eliminate indigenous religious practices while demonstrating fundamental incomprehension of native intellectual achievements and cultural values. The few surviving manuscripts provide tantalizing glimpses of sophisticated knowledge systems that were largely lost due to Spanish cultural intolerance and religious fanaticism. The establishment of encomienda systems granted Spanish colonists control over indigenous communities and their labour, while theoretically providing protection and religious instruction in exchange for tribute and service obligations. This institution, developed in Caribbean colonies, proved inadequate for governing dense indigenous populations with complex political traditions and economic systems. Encomenderos frequently abused their authority to extract excessive tribute, demand unpaid labour, and sexually exploit indigenous women while providing minimal protection or religious instruction promised under legal frameworks governing the system. Indigenous responses to Spanish conquest varied considerably across different regions and communities, ranging from accommodation and collaboration to persistent resistance and cultural preservation strategies that maintained traditional practices within colonial frameworks. Many communities that had opposed Aztec domination initially welcomed Spanish arrival as liberation from tributary obligations, only to discover that European demands proved even more onerous than imperial taxation. The gradual recognition of Spanish intentions created widespread disillusionment that contributed to numerous rebellions and resistance movements throughout the colonial period. The Great Temple's destruction and replacement with a Christian cathedral symbolized Spanish determination to eliminate indigenous religious practices while establishing European cultural dominance over conquered territories. The systematic dismantling of Aztec religious architecture provided building materials for colonial construction, while demonstrating Spanish power through the physical transformation of sacred landscapes. However, indigenous workers employed in cathedral construction incorporated traditional symbolic elements and construction techniques that preserved cultural continuity within imposed European architectural frameworks. Cultural syncretism emerged as indigenous communities adapted traditional practices to colonial circumstances, while incorporating European elements that provided protection from persecution or enhanced cultural effectiveness. The Virgin of Guadalupe cult, developing around 1531, combined Christian religious symbolism with indigenous goddess traditions in ways that provided spiritual comfort while enabling cultural preservation through acceptable European religious forms. Archaeological evidence indicates that indigenous communities maintained traditional ceremonial practices in concealed locations while participating in Christian observances required by colonial authorities. Indigenous demographic collapse continued throughout the 16th century as epidemic diseases, forced labour, tribute extraction, and social disruption combined to reduce native populations by an estimated 90% from pre-conquest levels. Smallpox, typhus, measles, and other European diseases spread rapidly through indigenous communities lacking immunity, while Spanish colonial policies prevented effective responses through traditional medical practices and social support systems. The demographic catastrophe created labour shortages that prompted increased African slave importation, while fundamentally altering the ethnic composition of colonial society. Spanish colonial administration evolved gradually from initial military occupation towards more systematic governance structures that incorporated indigenous political traditions while serving European economic interests. The establishment of viceroyalties, audiencias, and municipal governments created hierarchical administrative systems that extended Spanish authority throughout conquered territories while providing mechanisms for indigenous participation in colonial governance. However, these institutions consistently privileged European interests over indigenous welfare while limiting native political autonomy and cultural expression. The encomienda system's gradual replacement by hacienda agriculture and repartimiento labor drafts reflected Spanish adaptation to colonial conditions while maintaining exploitative relationships with indigenous communities. Large agricultural estates produced crops and livestock for both local consumption and export markets, while employing indigenous workers under conditions that resembled slavery despite legal distinctions. The repartimiento system theoretically provided wage labour for public works and private enterprises, but Spanish employers frequently violated regulations regarding working conditions, payment schedules, and community obligations. Indigenous communities developed various strategies for preserving cultural traditions and political autonomy within colonial frameworks, including the maintenance of traditional governance structures, religious practices, and economic systems that operated parallel to Spanish institutions. Many communities successfully petitioned for legal recognition of traditional land rights, political authorities, and cultural practices while adapting to colonial requirements through selective adoption of European elements. These adaptation strategies enabled cultural survival while creating hybrid institutions that combined indigenous and European characteristics. The establishment of indigenous schools and the training of native scribes enabled the preservation of traditional knowledge through European writing systems, while creating new forms of cultural expression that combined indigenous content with colonial literary forms. Documents produced by indigenous scribes, including the Florentine Codex compiled by Bernardino de Sahagún, preserved detailed information about pre-conquest society while demonstrating the intellectual capabilities of native scholars and their contributions to colonial knowledge systems. By 1600 AD, the colonial society that emerged from the Spanish conquest had fundamentally transformed Mesoamerican civilization while preserving essential elements of indigenous culture within new institutional frameworks. The demographic catastrophe, cultural destruction, and political subordination that characterized the conquest's immediate aftermath had given way to more stable colonial relationships that enabled indigenous survival and cultural adaptation. However, the foundations established during this transformative century would continue to shape Mexican and Central American societies for centuries to come, creating complex legacies of European colonialism, indigenous resistance, and cultural synthesis that defined the region's subsequent historical development. The Spanish conquest thus marked not merely the end of indigenous political independence, but the beginning of new forms of cultural expression, social organization, and historical consciousness that would characterize Latin American civilization through the present day. The collision of worlds that began with Cortez's landing in 1519 created profound transformations that extended far beyond military conquest to encompass every aspect of human experience, establishing patterns of cultural interaction, social hierarchy, and economic exploitation that would influence the Americas for centuries, while demonstrating both the devastating impact of European colonialism and the remarkable resilience of indigenous peoples in preserving essential elements of their cultural heritage within radically transformed circumstances.